All right. It's 6:30, so we're going to get started. Good evening, and welcome to the November 16 meeting of the Lake Forest Historic Preservation Commission. I'm Maureen Grinnell, and I'm the commission chair. The HPC was formed in 1998 to provide a more rigorous, open, and principally driven process to guide and protect the development and redevelopment of historically significant properties and open spaces throughout Lake Forest. The ultimate goal of this commission is to work in collaboration with city staff and the entire community to preserve the uniquely and widely recognized historical nature and visual and architectural integrity of Lake Forest. Properties located within Lake Forest's 5 local historic districts and properties that are designated as local landmarks fall under the purview of this commission. The commission is committed to evaluate each petition against the 17 standards outlined in Lake Forest Code of Ordinances. You'll hear us reference these standards tonight. They're also located on the city's website. Tonight we have 5 historic preservation commissions, along with city staff, to ensure that all interests and concerns of property owners, neighbors, architects, historians, and the community at large are heard and considered. The City of Lake Forest, including the HPC, is committed to conducting open and democratic meetings in accordance with procedures available with each meeting agenda, and those are at the back of the room at that back table. While we constantly strive to move each petition forward as efficiently and expeditiously as possible, that objective will always be balanced against the obligation of each commissioner to honor and uphold the traditions, standards, and guidelines that have guided this community for several decades. At this time, I'd like to introduce the members of the commission, actually ask them to introduce themselves, beginning with Elizabeth Dalliere.
I'm Elizabeth Dalliere.
Jan Gibson.
Robin Pettit.
Lloyd Culbertson.
All right. We have one petition before us this morning, this afternoon, this evening. I think it's kind of all run into
Let's
the
not
whole
go to
day.
morning.
We've got one, and it is a consideration of a single request. We'll get to that in a moment, but before I do, we do have the consideration of the minutes of the October 26, 2022 meeting of the commission. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
All right, second?
Second.
Okay, the minutes are approved. And we also have, before we get into our petition, we've got 2 staff members here this evening, beginning with Kathy Zerniak,
Kathy Cerniak.
okay, Director of Community Development, and
Kurt Asper, City Attorney.
excellent, thank you very much. All right, and now what I think you're all here for, the consideration of a request for a certificate of appropriateness approving changes to the design aspects of Phase 3 of the McKinley Road multifamily plan development. The properties included in this petition are addressed as 361 East Westminster and a portion of 373 East Westminster. Property owners are the City of Lake Forest and 361 Westminster LLC, represented by Todd Altunian and Peter Whitmer. Project representatives include Peter Whitmer Architect and O'Donnell Callahan Attorneys, LLC. Before we get into your presentation, Mr. Whitmer, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts by members of the commission?
Madam Chair, as I was visiting the site earlier this afternoon, I did run into Mr. Whitmer. I pulled into the site and he pulled in right behind me. We exchanged pleasantries. I do not think that anything was discussed that would interfere with my ability to objectively consider the decision.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we're going to be following the meeting procedures to the letter, as best possible. And thank you very much for appearing in front of us. You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Great, thank you. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting the revised plans for the Phase 3 McKinley development. This was, we'll call it the negotiated settlement presentation, which we negotiated with the city, and then we have presented with the Planning Commission last week this time, and now I have the pleasure of presenting in front of you. As you said, the 17 standards are the standards that are used to evaluate the project. And I wanted to hit a little bit of highlights about that. The standards basically talk about what's visibly compatible. So how that is defined. And I have, so there's compatibility, and let me just say that, what does that really mean? So that means when you're standing on the street, what you see and the things, the objects, the spaces around and what it is. It doesn't mean that it has to be in this historic district or in the other surroundings. So it doesn't distinguish between historic district and the other areas. And I think, you know, that was the modifications in the plans that we present tonight are very different in terms of the original plan that we had in terms of having the house basically on Westminster and its compatibility, visual compatibility with the surroundings, and then the condominium building and its visual compatibility with the surrounding buildings as you stand on the street and look at them in relationship to the other condominium buildings, the library, and the surrounding areas. So this isn't just, it makes no reference to historic, the historic district. For that, it's really about how you see it within the context of it, which makes sense. So I'm just going to run through the standards that we have. The standard height, and we have graphs here, and I'm not going to go through the numbers exactly for this, but the 361 house, and I'm just going to refer to that as the Westminster House, is 29.5 feet high, and that's pretty much the average of what the houses are on Westminster. And the McKinley, I'm going to call the 705 building, the McKinley building, and the streetscape there. If you look at that and what it's visibly compatible to, which are the other buildings in the surrounding areas, which are the condominium buildings and the library, you can see that they're somewhat similar. It's actually slightly below that in terms of the average of that. Visually, this is what that is. So you can see the relationship of the height of our building in comparison. Here's our building here, the 361 building in relationship to 401, and then the 333 buildings. And then across the street, again, the heights that are related to those. I did put a structure in here, the 373 building, which is a vacant lot, but that'll conform and come back. That is not part of this petition. Again, this is below is just a little blow up of that area to show the relationship of our elevations to the neighboring structures that are visually compatible. Again, the height, this is going east, north, south through the section of the site. You can see the line, and this is the 727 McKinley building, which is 3 stories, and ours that are 2 stories. Our parapet walls approximately 30 feet tall, and then the neighbors to the east, and the compatibility of those dimensions. Number 2, the proportion of the front facade, height and width. And again, I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but we are pretty much the average of those with all the buildings that are visually compatible with us. As you see it on the street, this is a visual of those heights and widths. This is our subject property here, the neighbor to the west, and this will be the 737 property that will be developing in the future, and then the 401 to the east. Just another piece showing that a little bit more across the street, has similar type proportions to that. Our condominium building, the 705 building, then, in the pieces that it's visually related to, is really not only the 333 Westminster building, but also obviously the other two phases in the library. And I think the proportions of this facade are similar in height and width to that. The proportions of the openings is pretty relatively straightforward. The 333 Westminster building, the house has double hung windows and openings that are very similar in terms of size and scale to other houses on the streetscape. The McKinley, the condominium behind it, is basically identical to the other condominium buildings in terms of the openings and sizes of that. Rhythm avoids in the front facade. So our east elevation, or I'm sorry, the north elevation of the single-family house has a porch, gables recessed underneath, and has similar proportions to the house to the west of it. And then the McKinley property we have has, again, same as the other condominium buildings. Spacing on the street, here are the numbers and the averages, but I think visually you can see there's a wide variety of spaces in between. While the houses across the street are somewhat closer, ours are a little bit further apart in the spacing between it on the housings of that. The other thing I think I would mention is the space between our buildings and the condominium building in the McKinley development is that we've been cognizant of that in the space between our buildings, and so that it creates the same sort of streetscape along those areas. Porches and entrances, recess in the condominium buildings, we are proposing the same entrances that we have in the other buildings, which are obviously visibly compatible. And then you can see the porches and entrances off the Westminster on our single-family house is similar to the other buildings in our site. The materials and textures, there's a variety of materials and textures on the street. We have made obviously the condominium building is brick, and things that are visibly compatible to that are brick. So that makes a lot of sense for that. The same kit of parts that are used on the other buildings, and the detailing is somewhat similar to the condominium building. The single-family house is we're proposing as clapboard, so that we feel that is more in keeping with the streetscape on the Westminster as opposed to having it as brick. Roof shapes. So on the single-family house, we have pitched roofs with projecting gable in the front, with dormers, and then it steps down with the garage, which is very similar to all the other houses in that vicinity. The condominium building obviously has a flat roof, which is similar, obviously, to the other condominium buildings, and also to the library and the house that's diagonal from that has a flat roof. I did provide some sectional information there on that sheet so that you could understand how the screening works with that. Walls of continuity. So this, we really feel like it's reflected in this blue line, which is this line along Westminster, and it's really created starting with the 333 building and the residents to the west, the 361 building as it comes across, and then the setback for the vacant lot will conform to that, and then the 401 building aligns with that to satisfy that. The other would be that the walls of continuity would be the elevations in the streetscape as you drive down through the space, and the visual connections of these in relationship to our new proposed condominium have that same relationship, which we feel is important. This is it shows how it goes through. The center axis, as you look onto, you see the dome of the library beyond. That'll have the access through there. You'll see the end of our new building at the end between these two streets, which do that. The scale of the structure, these are the graphs that basically have a height and width of those things. So the house is pretty similar to the other surrounding houses that we have. And then the condominium buildings, I think when you visually relate it to the other condominium buildings, it has a similar scale, although it being a 2-story structure as opposed to a 3-story structure. The directional expression of the front elevation with pretty much non-directional in terms of the horizontal and height of that, which is similar to the other buildings. The condominium building is basically identical to the other 2 buildings that we have and similar to the 333 building. 12 is not applicable. The resources, we are removing 1 tree, and on the site we have a landscape plan, which we can talk about in detail. We've done some things on the east for that, and I believe that is new construction, which is the styles of that were four-sided of these buildings. They all have the same design on all 4 sides on both of the house and the condominium building. I believe that is it. All the others are not applicable. With that, I'd like to conclude and open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. All right, in terms of what happens next, I did want to give staff an opportunity to identify any issues before we get to our questions.
Thank you, Chairman Grinnell, members of the commission. This is an unusual petition. This is not a new petition. As you know, the City Council entered into a settlement agreement several weeks ago. You were all provided with a copy of that settlement agreement. The terms, the specific details of that settlement agreement are not under the Commission's purview. They are under the City Council's purview. But that settlement agreement did direct that both the Plan Commission and City Council conduct through the normal public hearing process a review of what's been referred to as the settlement plan. So the plan before you is the one that's in your packet. That is what you're considering tonight. You are obligated, charged with considering that using your 17 standards as you would with any other plan that comes before you, any other set of plans. As Mr. Whitmer noted, the Plan Commission did conduct its public hearing last Wednesday. All of the zoning matters, use, overall plan development issues are under the purview of the Plan Commission. So what is before you, again, is related to your 17 standards, the architectural details, the massing, the materials, the landscape plan. Those are all in front of you. Mr. Whitmer reviewed the 17 standards. We also provided you with a detailed review of those standards for both the condo building and the single-family house. Last time this was before you, in April of 2021, there was a single condominium building that was before you. Phase 3 is now proposed to incorporate 2 buildings. Building 3, which is the condominium building, and the single-family home we're referring to as Building 4. So the overall development, if it is approved, would incorporate 4 buildings, green space, and both the east-west and north-south road. Again, you do have detailed findings in your packet, both for the house and for the condominium building. You do have a recommendation in support of the settlement plan. A number of conditions, 10 conditions are recommended, are detailed in the staff report. Several of those are your normal conditions that you often see. I wanted to call a few of those out. There was one recommended condition that the windows in the gable end of the house be modified. They appeared crowded. I believe in the information you've seen, the petitioner has responded and has adjusted that element. You have a condition that you often see, that a detailed exterior lighting plan must be submitted, that exterior lights must be, the source of the light must be shielded from view, the light must be directed downward, and lights except for motion lights, security lights must be on a timer to be turned off at 11. That is the standard part of the condition. We're also suggesting that that condition be amplified by adding that no exterior lights, except those necessary or required by code for safety and security, that no lights be permitted on the east side of the building, recognizing the adjacency to the single-family homes. There is a requirement that mechanical equipment be screened from off of the site. You normally have a condition that requires a material staging and contractor parking plan be submitted to staff along with an application for a permit. In this case, that's amplified a bit to recognize that this neighborhood has gone through a lot of construction activity. We know that construction activity is disruptive and can be messy. We have heard requests that no construction be permitted on Sundays. So we are recommending that that be incorporated in your condition. City code currently allows construction 7 days a week. So it becomes that balance of trying to get a project done as you're nearing the end of it, but also trying to limit construction so that the neighbors have some relief from that construction. You normally have a condition pertaining to landscape. In this case, there is enhanced language that speaks specifically to dense landscape screening along the east property line. And we would further recommend that as the building begins to take shape, that the city arborist, the city certified arborist, work with the developer and the neighbors, certainly if they're interested, to really look at what is appropriate on that property line, what will thrive, what will provide year-round screening. I think rather than simply decide now what should go there, I think what we want to describe is that it needs to be something that's dense and of a reasonable height, but also something that will survive and thrive along that property line. We've heard comments about the timing of the house. How do we assure that the developer would proceed with construction of the house once the condominium building is built? We are recommending, again, the site is going to be tight, so we acknowledge that getting the condominium built may require some use of that front portion, but we are recommending that prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the third condominium building, that the construction on the house would need to be underway. Permits would need to have been applied for, issued, paid for, and construction work on the site proceeding diligently. So we have worked to address that. There's also a condition recommending that there's continued collaboration, cooperation around efforts to underground the utilities. You may recall that the utilities near buildings 1 and 2 and onto the church property were undergrounded earlier. There's a portion of utilities, I believe there are 2 or 3 poles and overhead wires immediately east of the 333 building and the small house that remain, and we did hear throughout the process some interest from neighbors in seeing those undergrounded. Those utilities are very visible from Westminster, the streetscape. Those are the conditions as we have recommended. Again, your focus is on the 17 standards, not on the zoning aspects of this petition. And I would be happy to answer any questions, and Chairman, as you noted, Mr. Asperuth is here as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Cerniak. All right. We have some questions then, and requests for clarification from the commission to either the petitioner or staff. That's next. And I'd like to start with Commissioner Pettit, please.
Hello again?
And is your microphone on? There we go.
Okay. You know, this is not the first time you've been before us, so I was quite surprised when we got our packet and found so many of the required elements missing from it. Code 155.07, Section C1A, lists 20 elements that must be included for us to consider a certificate of appropriateness. What we're missing is a completed building scale calculation form, impervious surface calculation, description of exterior, interior materials for the condominium, the tree survey, dimension drawings, floor plans, cross-section for the condominium, and additionally, the code goes on to say in section C2D that the petitioner is required no less than 14 days prior to presenting this to outline or stake out the building for us at the site. I was over there 3 times, and that just wasn't done. So all of this makes me think that this is moving too fast to put all the information together. But we'll proceed realizing that we're working from a real handicap, not having all of that information. One of the things I thought should be corrected is, it's just a minor mistake on the statement of intent, but it was talking about the property under consideration includes the western 38 feet of 373 site and does include the remaining portion of the eastern part. I assume you mean does not include, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The height of the condominium, we got to, I saw at one point it was called out at 33 feet 6. That lot slopes significantly. What would be the height of the building at the northeast corner?
35 feet to the parapet top, to the, that would be to the penthouse top, to the edge of the parapet of the edge of the building. It would be 5'6" lower than that, so it would be 33.6 at that edge.
33.6 is,
I'm sorry, 33.6. At the penthouse, at the corner of that is 35 feet, which is the code. And it will be 5'6" less than that at the edge of the building. So that would be,
well, no, when you're measuring, you measure the very top, which would be the top of the penthouse, and the lowest point, and that's
35
how,
feet.
per code, it's measured. I think I read somewhere that lot slopes over 4 feet. I
That's-
think it may take you over the 35 feet, but we'll go on from there. The proportion of the front facade. This is tricky because I see many front facades, whether you're talking about the lot front facade or the building front facade. But when I saw that the petition was going back similar to the earlier master plan, I went back and did some research. And back in 2019, when you were addressing the Plan Commission, you noted that from the Westminster site, both buildings read as a large mass, and that the green space between the buildings was blocked and not providing relief from that. And you acknowledged that was a negative. So I did a little study myself, and it's very rough. But you can see that you see quite a bit of the condominium building above this, and it's reading as a larger mass. You're missing some of the articulation of the house and that sort of thing. So my question, I guess, is what changed between 2019 and today?
I think the 38 feet. So in 2019, we hadn't annexed the additional 38 feet to the east, which actually allowed us to fit a single-family house in that area. So I think that's what really changed for the one. I would say that the illustration, though it's a little hard to see from where I am to what you drew, but I'm assuming that that is an elevation so that you don't have any perspective for that. So that would be if one thing were projected right in front of the other. So I think that is probably not exactly how you would see it. You would not see the top of the condominium building over top of the house in that.
Well, even in your
Elevations.
elevation, it shows it, but,
And that's what I would say, that those are elevations, so they don't allow for the perspective of that, which would be below.
the width of the house, I just call it house, is the largest on the block, obviously. I mean, on that side of the block.
I would say that's incorrect.
No, I mean, I don't think you can count the multifamily at the corner, but I'm including the garage, okay?
Okay.
I'm including the garage because it does appear as a mass. So, my question is there any thought or potential ability to maybe turn the garage or something to reduce the width of the house?
Well, I think what's visibly compatible is the house next door. So I think you can ignore the 333 building in the house next door, which is considerably longer and wider than ours. I would say that because of the site configuration and how you get the garage in without having a garage that either faces the alley or faces the street, it makes it difficult to make that house narrower. One of the things I would say, the design works pretty well in terms of captivating the garage doors to the interior so that you have an auto court that you can come into that. We have 35 feet back there, which I think is enough to get enough space to turn around. So I think when you take the numbers of the building next door, and then actually the house that we tore down, which is no longer there, was pretty much the same width. It was 77 feet too, which had a garage alongside of it. So I think there is some, we feel like it does meet that compatibility for that. I don't think we would look at an option where we would have the garage or it flipped around. I think the configuration that we proposed makes the most sense.
Which I also get to the fact that the lot now has an alleyway, it's got a motor court, it's got a driveway to one condominium, a driveway to another condominium, and a driveway to the house, all within that, 30 feet of the street? And it's a lot of hard surface, and it shrinks the lot visibly, in my opinion. And I think it may cause also a safety concern. There's a lot going on in that small little space. So I don't know if any thought was ever given to moving the entrance to Building 3 to the back of the lot, where the driveway down to Building 2's parking is.
When you say back of the lot, do you mean to the south end?
To the south end.
South
yes.
end. I don't think we considered that, but one of the things, the difficulties of that, the grade does not, it slopes up there, so we have more, basically a bigger ramp, and that we would take open space that we're providing down there, it would take up with the ramp in that location, so that would be take area for there. So we feel like that would, I don't believe a scheme like that would work very well. We do feel like the entrances where they're currently located, basically hide it from most of the other spaces. So they're adjacent to the 333 building. And by consolidating them there in that location, the amount of it's really not the purview of the 17 standards to talk about safety and that. It's really about the visuals. So those standards don't really address that issue of it. It would really be the visual impact of that. So I think visually it makes a lot of sense to have them all in that location.
I beg to disagree, but we can disagree on that. It's putting an awful lot of hard surface right out in front and very little green space. So that is a concern of mine. If we look at the west elevation of the condominium building, building 3, and again, we don't have dimensions on the drawings, but I think that's probably about 200 feet long?
Yes.
Yeah. When you look, you have a picture somewhere of the building 1 and 2 with the driveway in between. And I think if visually to me, again, I did my own cut and paste and to come to this conclusion, but that alleyway gets cast in a lot of shadow, kind of dark, and then you put a large building at the end. I think it's going to give the McKinley Road kind of a overly crowded look. And again, that's my opinion.
So basically you're saying the depth, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying,
So when you look at the alleyway between 1 and 2,
1 and 2,
yeah.
correct.
And you look down there and you have a brick wall at the end.
You have a two-story building at the end of that, correct.
Uh,
And you have an entranceway into the doorway into
Right,
that piece.
Right. I just am concerned that
So
tall building, that's going to become a very dark space.
well, let me just get a little parallel. So when you're standing in Market Square and you see the distance from here to the end building at Market Square, basically sort of the similar amount of distance, this two-story building here, that's what you're talking about.
But Market Square doesn't have buildings on both sides of that.
No,
streetscape.
I mean, I think
It's
you're
got a
right. But I'm
plaza
just
in the
saying that
middle.
from a
Yeah.
distance standpoint, just
Yeah.
to give you an idea of what the scale is.
Okay. Let's move on to, standard 3, proportion of openings. I'm not going to, proportion of openings, for me, the one really standing out is the condominium. And, I think that it all kind of starts to come together, whether it be standard 3, standard 4, the rhythms of solids and voids, and also the entrance porches. I think that when we take a large building and a fairly flat front, fairly flat sides, fairly flat back, we get a boxy approach. And of course, without the plan vision, only elevations to look at, which are difficult to read, but in terms of articulation, I think the condominium building would definitely benefit from more articulation, possibly porches that would take the windows in, reducing light spill, that sort of thing. I find that it's a little bit boxy and intimidating. My opinion. One of the other questions I have, and I'm skipping around here a little bit, is, again, the roof shapes. To me, the first floor units all have nice patios, okay? That's great. Outdoor space, love it, wonderful. The second floor, they have balconies. Could the balconies not become more like patios themselves, second floor garden patio units, much like the larger one at the east end of Building 1? In which case, then you could eliminate the need for a rooftop because you're satisfying garden, outdoor living space on both level 1 and 2. And it would allow you to potentially put a more residential looking rooftop, be it hip roof or, whatever, but take the Building 3 and blend it. Blend it to the neighbors, blend it to the historic side of the property. Have you thought of that?
I think that what is visually compatible, the house visibly is compatible to the streetscape on Westminster, has the pitch roofs, makes a lot of sense. I think the condominium being visibly compatible to the other two buildings, in my opinion, is visibly compatible to this. And so that if we start to add roof shapes and pieces onto that, it doesn't fit in. So
What about more articulation in the building itself?
I think that its articulation, it matches the other two buildings, which
But we're not trying to match those buildings. That's been the whole issue, is that, and where did I read? You even said it so yourself. Back in 2019, Mr. Whitmer to Plan Commission, you envisioned a different architectural style than the first two buildings to bring the scale down and create a transition from the higher density development along McKinley Road to a single-family neighborhood. You also told them at that time that there would be no rooftop decks.
and that's
What
when we
has
had a
changed?
3-story building. That's when we were looking at a 3-story building, yes. And then we had a single-family house in the front. So the change was from a 3-story building, which we felt wasn't compatible, to a 2-story building, which we felt that fit the context much better.
I'm going to stop at this point, okay?
Okay, thank
And
you very much for
pass.
your questions and comments, Commissioner Pettit. Commissioner Culbertson. And just as a point for the audience here, he's not really separating from us. His video is not working. His monitor is off. So, we're all here.
Thank you for clarifying that. I have my first question is to the petitioner. A lot of the issue that we're all dealing with is surrounds the footprint of the proposed project vis-a-vis the one that was originally envisioned in the 2016 master plan. And I know conditions have changed since then, but I wonder if you just explain to
Commissioner
us.
Culbertson, is your microphone on?
It is, but is this not working as well? The screen, the microphone. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. In the event that you didn't hear the preface to my question, there's a difference between the footprint that was originally envisioned in the 2016 master plan and the footprint of the project that we're considering today. And I'm just wondering if you'd explain to us how that morphed into from a smaller footprint to a larger footprint, especially in view of the fact that the 2016 master plan phase 3 seemed to have been acceptable to all the parties involved, the commission, the neighbors, and the petitioner. And now you are pursuing a larger footprint, and I just wonder if you'd explain
Sure.
what the motivation was there, or how the conditions changed to justify it.
One is it's a master plan, so I think that if we look at the overall, back in 2016, which is quite a while ago, we had just, I believe, just started the construction of phase 1. So if we go to phase 2, that building changed from that plan. The house to the south, it was encouraged that we purchase that. We purchased that house, and we bought that house. We widened the building, and we changed it. So that's a pretty big variation. It's actually somewhat similar variation to what we did at the other end.
And you went back to boards and commissions to get that approved?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
That was all approved.
Carry on.
So, the 2016 was a point in time where we had not purchased the property. We hadn't gotten to a purchase agreement with the city for the property. So we thought that there would be a 3-story building in that location when we put it in there, as opposed to a 2-story building. So there'd be more footprint. We hadn't studied it to the depth that we needed to. So as times evolved, we entered into a purchase agreement. We worked through the plan. We added the additional space. We bought the property to the 373 property. We were able to annex that space and really make the project workable. So the increased footprint is really when we went to a 2-story building from a 3-story building. The other thing is that to get the required parking underneath, to have underground parking versus surface parking, we really need the depth in the space underneath to get enough parking spaces for the building. So that also drove the size of the building.
Was underground parking part of the 2016 proposition, or or did that come?
I don't think that. I mean, if we were thinking about condominium building, we would think about the underground parking in that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the goals that we wanted to achieve from the beginning, is really to not have surface parking on the project, and to do underground parking.
So instead of a 3-story building with a smaller footprint, you modified your thinking to a 2-story building with a somewhat larger footprint.
Correct.
Both instances had a single-family home proposed on Westminster, is that correct?
We ended we went through obviously a lot of plans between
Yeah,
2016 to here, which had duplexes in the front, single family in the front, buildings that had 3 stories that had all kinds of different roofs on the top that stepped down.
Right.
And all, so there was a lot of iterations that we've gotten from here to there.
My next question would be a clarification from the city attorney or staff with respect to what is the prevailing plan now? Is the master plan been superseded by a subsequent plan? Please.
Certainly. So the 2060 master plan is only a guidance document. From at least the zoning perspective, the governing approval for the property right now is the PUD that was, or the plan development that was approved by the city council in April of 2021 that approved the, I guess, plan that was at issue over the last year and a half. So that's the governing approval for the property right now.
The April 21,
April 2021 plan development approval.
that is the plan.
That is the overall zoning that is in place for the property right now.
Very good. I'd like to ask staff about, my particular concern focuses on standard 10, which is scale and structure. And I noted in the staff report that you contend, that staff contends that the standard is met. But I'm a little bit unclear on the language you use there. I'm not sure I understand it completely. I wonder if I just might read the standard 10 requirement for a certificate of appropriateness. Scale and structure. The size and mass of structures in relation to open spaces, windows, door openings, porches, adjacent structures, and balconies shall be visually compatible with the properties, structures, sites, public ways, objects, and places to which they are visually related. I see them visually related to the buildings to the west, which are part of the McKinley development. I don't see them terribly visually related to the structures to the east. But in the staff consideration of standard 10 and stating that the standard is met, it says the building scale provisions normally applied to single-family and duplex dwellings do not apply to this multifamily development. I wonder if you'd explain that to me.
Sure. The building scale ordinance, which is a calculation defined in the building code, applies to single-family homes and duplexes. This is a planned development. A planned development is currently proposed with 4 buildings. The planned development was approved, as was just noted, through city council approval of an ordinance approving a special use permit. The code provides for planned developments, which can consist of multiple parcels, multiple buildings, private roads, shared open space. The code allows that ordinance, a special use ordinance, a planned development, essentially to establish unique zoning entitlements for a particular development. So in this case, we are not looking at a standalone single-family home. That home is a unit in a different building form within the overall plan development. Does that answer your question?
Obliquely, yeah. I'm going to try and get my head around that, but I appreciate the response. And I'll come back to that probably a little later on. Just a question to the petitioner. It's been suggested by some letters and by Commissioner Pettit that there's been questions about the garage location for the Phase 3 building. It does seem to be in an awkward location with respect to the single-family home that's proposed, as there's somewhat of an incursion into the backyard of that proposed single-family dwelling. And then there are traffic considerations that garage location is close to Westminster and might increase circulation on that street as you try to get in and out. And it's been suggested that maybe it should be moved more to the center, to the other end of the building, and more central to the whole complex, where the other garage and driveway openings are. Is that something you would consider?
I don't think so. One of the things is that I mentioned before, it's really an impossibility to put the ramp down into the center of the building.
I'm sorry, it's an impossibility for what?
It'd be very difficult to put the ramp like in the center of the building. And if we put the ramp at the other end, it basically would take up all the green space at that end. So it would obliviate that. It seems to make the most sense. One of the things is that, you know, the residents to the west has a similar kind of situation with a backyard, you know, in terms of the outside space. And that's the way this residence would be too. You still have a courtyard outdoor space off the back. So we feel like that really accomplishes that. And that by having where we're located, to us makes the most sense. So I think, you know, the idea of having the ramp at the south end and basically having it a driveway that comes in and takes up all that really wouldn't make sense to us.
Okay. My last question for now would be to staff. If we were to consider a condition, well, would we be able to consider a condition of approving a certificate of appropriateness based on some kind of restriction for use of the rooftop area during certain hours of the day?
Use is not under the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission. There is no limitation on uses of terraces, balconies, patios, rooftop spaces in the zoning code.
Could they be incorporated? Is this going to be a homeowners association, this building?
Yes.
So there could be an incorporation into the declaration of covenants and restrictions to that effect, perhaps. Is that something you'd be willing to consider?
I don't believe so.
Okay. What kind of conditions are we able to attach to, as a general question, what kind of conditions are we able to attach to this petition if we see fit to?
Normally, the Historic Preservation Commission, again, you have some general conditions with respect to lighting and final landscape plan, but with different petitions, the commission may have required refinement to window locations, or you often you might ask for. I think at your last meeting you included a condition that required elimination of the dormers on the front elevation of a particular house. So conditions related to design aspects, the commission often includes.
Very good. That's all the questions I have now, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Culberson. Commissioner Dalliere.
Yes, hello. As I was hearing a lot of concerns about the parking and the fact that this is one complex of 4 buildings, I had a recollection of visiting Washington University in St. Louis, where they've actually devised an underground parking garage with one entrance where people pop up in all the buildings. So if there were such a thing you could construct, you wouldn't have to have extra ramps. You could just have that one ramp, and everyone could get to their building from it. But maybe it's a little late for that. Just a thought as you're planning.
I'm not exactly sure I understand.
Because this is one complex.
No, I understand your question.
Yeah.
You're saying basically use an elevator to, basically it's an elevator that you come down with the cars and up and down?
No, there would be one ramp, and then it would be a bigger underground area in which you could access all the buildings underground so that you would alleviate all these separate entrances to and from parking.
No, that's an impossibility at this point, yes.
Okay, well, just was thinking that would be nice. Okay. I'll leave the questions to the condo first. Just a few clarifications. One thing about the condominium I noticed, and I apologize to all the neighbors because I've circled the neighborhood so many times in my car. I'm now probably have the image of a stalker, and I've also been walking with my 2 dogs who've gotten loose a few times. But anyways, you can see the building also from Washington Street in between the homes. You will see that. So there's more than just, 2 separate access views. So the long building will be visible from that as well. And a couple clarifications in your drawings. There on the east elevation, the north side, there's metal columns and a balcony. Are those windows opening up to a balcony, or are those supposed to be French doors?
I believe they're supposed to be French doors. That's
Okay,
correct, yeah.
because in the drawing
Yeah,
there
I
are windows.
I noticed that too.
Okay,
Yeah.
just was hoping people didn't have to crawl out. Okay, and the other question is, what are the metal projections from the staircase structures up on the rooftop deck?
There'll be trellises like on the other 2 buildings,
Okay, so trellises, like,
shade trellises.
how big are they going to be?
They're basically the same size as on the other buildings. So they're shown on the roof plan
Okay,
in outline.
it's just, okay, oh, so I see these trellises, okay.
Yep. Oh, I see. I don't know where I see the picture that you have there, yeah.
I just have a picture from someone helping me. I see what it is. Okay, I was just curious what those were. Okay, next question. I see stone coping on almost the entire length of the west elevation, but not on the east elevation, only in parts.
Yeah.
Is
well,
that to be included or not?
No, the idea there was, we discussed this at the last HPC meeting, was not to have the stone coping on the east side so that we didn't have this white line along the top, so that we had
Okay.
minimal impact from the contrasting colors. So on the east elevation, we've tried to minimize the amount of stone on that, and that was that intent.
Okay, I was not part of that meeting, so I do not know all of that was discussed before. Okay, and both the staff report and you commented that there will be slight differences in refinements and ornamentation found in this building versus the other 2 buildings, and what changes are those exactly, besides obviously the coping being one of them?
If you look at the heads of we have limestone heads on the east elevation too, or on the other elevations. On the east elevations, we have a soldier course along the head, so that we've eliminated some of the detailing on the limestone on that east elevation. And again, that was, you can see the contrast here that, let's see here. This is, so that's the west elevation with the limestone coping, and then we have a brick detail on the north and east elevation as opposed to the others, and that was a limitation of that. So I think that's the main changes in terms of those details.
Okay. The other comments I have also reflect the comments the previous commissioners have made about the roof shapes. The standard 8 being roof shapes and 14 compatibility. You reference a variety of roof and home styles in your submission packet for the drawing of the house. And one thing is clear, is there is a variety of architectural styles that comprise the historic district. Every home is unique and no 2 are the same. Yet we have a situation where the condo building proposed is almost a third replica minus the coping and nearly identical to the first 2 buildings designed as a warehouse with flat roofs. And you also referenced there are many flat roofs there, including the library ring flat roof. So there is really a cluster of flat roofs in this area with the addition of Building 3. So I guess as we comment that this is now in the historic district, and we are looking for uniqueness, which is what makes it so special there, I think some of the commissioners had also asked about possibly changing the roof to reflect a slight difference, to make this building have its own personality and be unique. But you don't have to answer that because you already have, I think, unless you want to.
Well, I'm just not clear on the standard that you're referencing for that.
The roof shapes.
Shapes.
Yeah, because we already
So they're
have.
compatible, visually compatible. So by in being the same, does that not make them compatible?
Compatibility in the historic district requires things to not be all the same. It requires them, in my interpretation, to be different, to have a unique, but yet blended identity. That's what makes it, that's what you fit in. If we design the same home over and over in the historic district, it would be different. If a new builder came in and designed every home to be exactly the same, then we would have a subdivision and not a historic district. So that was my comment on
Okay.
compatibility.
I understand.
Okay. So my only thought was if there was any way that we could consider, or you could consider changing some of these elements just to give this Building 3 a little bit more personality of its own. Because even when you look on East Laurel, and there are 3 brick buildings, and I don't think any are in themselves, you know, standards of architecture by any means, but because they're all different, it's not as, you know, solid. It gives you a little more variety. It gives you, you don't take them all in as one. So you just walk along and you don't notice any such one because there are different ones. That's just my point.
So you're saying the McKinley or the Kelmscott development?
Not the Kelmscott, the ones across the street, sorry.
Oh,
The
okay.
Kelmscott, yes, you're absolutely right. That's entirely the same.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah, yeah.
understood
No,
what you're talking
the ones on
about.
East, because
Yeah, you know, if you actually bring up another point that I hadn't made, that we do have entrances off the street in the second building too. So if you look at the west elevation, there's, you know, so you have these sort of different sets of entrances, which is a subtle difference between the other buildings. So you have some entrances that go directly into the units from there, which is a subtle difference between the other 2 buildings too.
Okay. Right. The other is the front facade, because if I asked, for instance, my kids to pick me up in the building, I don't know if they'd know where the front is, because it's not entirely clear in this building. So, and also just another question, and this probably isn't our purvey, but is that street wide enough for, if a car were waiting to pick somebody up, for another car to go by, or is it going to block all the traffic coming out? But that's not our problem, but just a thought.
It is wide enough to have 2 cars go by, yeah. And there are front doors with the addresses on each of the entrances, so I think that they'll understand where the doors are for those.
Okay, regarding the house now, we'll move on. First of all, I think it's great that there's a single-family house, so I think that's fabulous that you're adding that. So thank you very much for doing all the work and for looking into all the different neighborhood styles of the roof shapes and everything. That was really a great effort. But just a couple of thoughts on, I think Commissioner Pettit focused on the width of the house that you have proposed. It is wide, and it also uses horizontal wood siding, which kind of makes it look a little bit wider. And as we're trying to fit it into the context, being next to these, or in front of these brick buildings, and I know adjacent to it is a wood, and probably next to it is a wood building, would you consider making the north gable a brick structure? To kind of break up some of the long, you know, the horizontal width, and also incorporate some brick into that building to kind of help it buffer between the bricks and the woods.
I think it makes sense to have it more historically correct, which would be like the other buildings that are clapboard of that era, which has all four sides clapboard. So I think it makes more sense to have it all clapboard as opposed to having a piece of brick on one piece of it. And I would think that it fits better into the historic fabric by being all clapboard on all the sides.
Well, I think there is a historic precedent for that, as you said, but there's also historic precedence for brick as well. But that's just a question. And also, the other question I had was, and I don't know, when I look at the proportion of the front facade and the solid to void, the roof over the garage is a lot of roof. Would you consider making that a second story? Kind of building it up a little bit with adding a window or something to make it a little bit less looking at roof?
I just want to pull it up just so I know what we're talking about.
Right.
You know, I think when you look at the west elevation, you see the, let me just make it a little bigger here. I think the scale and proportion of the garage as it steps down makes a lot of sense. You have the scale of the roof. I would think it would actually make the whole thing much larger and seem much wider if we raised the garage portion up to that. So then I think, to me, it would seem like it is a wider house than if we'd raise the roof of the garage up for that. Is that what you're proposing?
Well, yes, for a few reasons. One was to break up just that whole looking at a roof. And two is behind it, looking at the brick building that's behind it. So if you made the house a little bit taller, you would also hide some of that. The third was from a perspective of living in that home. I think I would prefer to live out over the beautiful streetscape and my lovely neighbors across the street than looking back, having windows in the back and looking at my neighbors' condos. So that's why I was proposing that. And I know it's increasing the square footage, but just from a standpoint. Those are my thoughts and questions for that part. The other question I had was about the chimney and its placement. Because of the two styles of roofs and where the chimney is located, it just kind of pops out from nowhere, and it's also white. So would you consider, one, changing the color of that chimney, and two, pushing the chimney to one of the sides of the house to fit in more with all the other?
One is that, the perspective of that will make the chimney lower. The chimney is located over a place where we want to have a fireplace, so it makes it difficult to have a chimney on the end of the house based on the floor plan that we have. Changing the color of it from brick or from white to gray, I think, that would be something that we thought it made sense to make it like the trim and make it basically look like a masonry fireplace. So that was the original intent for having it white as opposed to having it gray like the clapboard. So we distinguish between the different materials.
Well, as it is, it's not particularly symmetrical, and
But, the design of
Popping
the
out.
house is not symmetrical. So, it's not like a Georgian house where you have the fireplaces on the ends. So I'm not sure that is a strong element for that.
okay, so you would not consider moving the chimney nor changing the color, just to be clear.
I think we would, changing the color, whoever buys a house can paint the colors whatever they want. So, I think we want to make sure that the material is what it is and the paint is what it is. So the color could be flexible with the design.
Elizabeth, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
I'd just like to ask, is that, I think it stands out a little bit like a sore thumb as well. I just wondered, does it have to be that high? Does it have to be that tall? Is there some kind of code requirement?
It does need to be a minimum height above the ridge of the, it has to be
Of the
2.5
peak
feet
roof.
above the ridge for the, yeah, I mean, there's a code requirement that
Oh.
requires that, so.
Staff, asking staff if it were any lower than that, would it be in violation?
We'd have to do a technical review, but as Mr. Whitmer said, you have to
You have to be,
a certain distance away from the roof and a certain distance above the peak.
okay, but that is, it's most prominent on the rear of the house, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We
All
could
right.
certainly review that to make sure it meets the minimum requirements.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if we could lower it down, I don't think that would be a big deal.
Carry on, Elizabeth, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for asking that. I have had to raise a chimney for that reason, so I know they have to be taller. The landscaping plan, it does look like it's in its early stages. In general, I would comment that there's, that's under our purview, landscaping, I believe. That we do need more screening. For instance, you put in, or not you, but the Mariani, whatever, green velvet boxwood, which is supposed to be adjacent to this house. However, that is not a salt-tolerant plant, and it's going to be right next to the roadway. So given a day like today, I mean, it's not a particularly sturdy plant, but it would probably suit it better to have some more evergreens and sturdy plants to help shield things.
That's what we have on the other two buildings, have the boxwood along the edge, and we have a protection against that for the salt. We've actually done pretty well for that. I think it's, if you walk down the street and you see that, I think it's what really one of the enduring qualities of the space. We've looked at that and sort of have studied that piece pretty heavily in detail.
Okay, well, I read up on my boxwoods. I've had bad.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of problems with boxwood. Trust me. I know all about
But
that.
that was one that was mentioned was not salt tolerant, so maybe you got a good batch. Well done. Okay, so that's more screening, and I do appreciate our efforts to incorporate the single-family home into your plan. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dallier. Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you. I first want to say, we really want to work with you to make this a successful development. And we want it to be done correctly, and we want it to be resolved. I feel as if I've grown up with the plan for several years. If it were a child, I think it'd probably be a teenager now, because it's been going on for a while. But we think the changes, I want to cover the changes to and I'll point out the standards that I'm going to work on with you, and hope that you might, some are not overburdensome, that I think hopefully you might change a little bit so we can eliminate some of the standards that may not be met. And the standards I'm going to work on are 14, 4, 7. And the first one is really compatibility. But I want to talk about the house first. And this, I'm kind of going out on a limb here. If I had been able to talk with you a couple weeks ago, because I couldn't because of the Open Meetings Act, I would have taken you up to, it's a house that is actually a replica of George Wythe, W-Y-T-H-E, built in the 1750s in Williamsburg, and it's Georgian, but it's very plain. And when I saw it, it's on a street that nobody goes on, but it's a replica in Lake Bluff. And when
It's on Cambridge. We're
on
having addition to it
Cambridge.
right now.
Oh, you know it?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So when I saw it, I thought, my goodness, what a perfect house, because it would be the size, and the real house in Williamsburg's big. It's got to be 3,500 square feet. But the Georgian plain, you could use your kit of tools and all of that. You could use it as brick. I know you mentioned something about clapboard, but I saw it as you turn the corner on Westminster, I almost visualize it fitting in quite nicely with the Federal House at the end, this 1750 Georgian house right there, and a Victorian house, and then, of course, all the other houses on the other side of the street. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It's probably past due, but I thought I at least should talk about it. You have a colonial revival that actually, you're kind of treating it as a farmhouse, and some of this is kind of from New England, and some is from Barnes, and I'm looking at all the parts of this. And so what I'm going to do is go through 5 different areas to talk about, to maybe get your agreement on maybe changing a few things here and there. I'm going to cover windows and doors, roof materials, dormers, the trim, the barge boards and so forth, columns, number 5, columns. So I want to start with windows, because I think windows are really very important in terms of a house, and I'll start with the north elevation. This is unusual. This is an unusual house because it's almost like a fishbowl. In other words, most houses, you see the front, and you may see a side, but you don't see all 4 sides of a house. I mean, that's really rare in town. Even think of your own houses. This one, you're going to see it from the north. You're going to see it as you drive east on Westminster, so you're going to see the west part of the house. As you drive west on Westminster, you're going to see the east. And if you're in the condo, you're going to see the back of the house, which is the south part. So it's really difficult. This is not easy, getting a house to fit all 4 sides. So I'm going to start with the north, because that's the front of the house that's most important. Thank you very much for turning the gable window on the 2nd floor into a double hung. That eliminates that. Looks good. It really does. I'm going to talk about what I call bonus windows, and this is with the garage. And I actually agree with Commissioner Dalliere that if you do increase the height of the garage, certainly you could put 2 double hungs right there in place of the bonus windows. If you didn't increase the height, and I'm thinking of increasing the height to kind of protect it from the condo that's in the back. In other words, you really want to see the streetscape, you want to see the house. But if you didn't want to do that, the bonus windows are kind of problematic. I would eliminate them. I don't agree with the 1 shutter part. You probably want to have a smaller 6/6, maybe you could have 2 small 6/6s, but you'd have shutters on both sides. And I just wanted to know where you might think about that, because the bonus windows are really odd on this house.
Windows, I mean, I've never heard that term, bonus windows, so I'm not sure. That's a new term for me.
Yeah.
I think that we think of this as a pretty saltbox type design, and so that they would be kind of like the chicken shed that's next to it, which would have smaller windows like that in the scale of that. So that's what we have that's what you're calling the bonus windows.
Yeah.
The shutters, a lot of times they did have 1 shutter that came across to close it up. So, I think that is what drove that design. I would be concerned about, again, I'm surprised that you want to raise that up just because it increases the mass on
I know it
the
does.
street.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it, when you come down Westminster, if you look at the west elevation and you see that piece up against that, the scale of that is, it steps down in a sort of typical manner that you would in a farmhouse, that you have the pieces go out, and that as the centerpiece was built and the addition was added, it stepped down off of that. So it's peculiar to me that you would want to raise that up.
Yeah.
I understand the thought process of wanting to hide the condominium behind.
Yeah.
But I think with the vegetation, with a large tree in the front, and that it will shield that, plus the perspective of this in a 2-story building behind it is pretty limited in terms of what you can see in the back side.
Okay.
The existing buildings, the 3-story buildings on the side, you see are higher, and you see that too, just as you see the 333 building.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the balance of the building, and actually colonial buildings, colonial revivals, often they're very symmetrical, it's
And
not.
that's what, I think, because, you bring up a really good point in terms of, how do you fit this in? Because it's not only that you see it from all sides,
Yeah,
but
I
the
know.
functionality of it.
Yeah.
How do you get the garage in? We felt it was very important not to have the garage door in Westminster. In the drive off that was one of the things that came up early in the design of this. And so, tucking it into the auto court behind, where there was a question of the green space, and taking that up. I
And-
think it makes a lot of sense to have the cars off the street.
And I
not
don't have a
them
problem
parked
with
on
it, yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is the functionality of the house itself and how it comes together. Pretty tough to do a symmetrical house when you're in this, poured
Well, I
in this kind of
understand. No, I
space. So I don't
understand
think that's
that.
really a possibility to have a Georgian colonial where it's symmetrical. You're going to have one side that's smaller and then the other side.
Okay.
I think if you look at a lot of the houses in those areas, some are symmetrical, some aren't.
Well, I understand.
I think there's a variety of that.
Well, I would suggest then, if you want to keep the same height, swap out those windows with something more in keeping.
And if that were I feel that there's a lot of issues with a lot of other things. If that were the thing that we want to do, I think I could see where you get a rationale for that to
Okay.
to
All right.
make that. yeah.
All right, well, that's fine. The next thing, since windows, let's go to the back of the house. No, let's go to the west elevation. So there you have the garage, and you have, once again, a bonus window, what I call a bonus window. And what about replacing that with a nice vent, a colonial vent in there?
Yeah, we could. I would be
that
up for
okay?
that. That
All
would
right.
make sense to me to do
Okay.
that. Because it has no function.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, and the east elevation, as you drive west on Westminster, once again, you have windows, and I see, once again, two single windows. Now, we haven't received a floor plan, so I don't know what these rooms, how they're laid out, as Commissioner Pettit has asked. So I don't know what you have, but why don't you balance that out by having another double hung right there, rather than two singles, and that make that a lot more appealing as you're driving or walking Westminster. So deal with a triangle there of windows. Might you be interested in changing that around? East elevation.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see. We have the master bedroom there, and the bed wall is there. It's really the only option for the bed wall in that, because we have a first floor master. These are the plans that we submitted.
Oh, we didn't receive any of those.
Well, this is what we had. So it has a master bedroom in that area in terms of
Okay.
that. So makes it kind of difficult because you'll have there isn't a wall.
Couldn't you put a bed on another wall?
You can see in the floor plan, it makes it kind of difficult.
I don't know. I can't see the plan. I haven't seen it. Okay, well, we can move on, since we haven't seen it.
This is the plan, so.
Okay,
You have the front door, the door here, the bed here. There really is sort of only one option for the bed.
you know what? It's okay. We'll get back to that. Hang on to that picture, though. Let's talk about the back of the house. The windows are fine, I think, on first floor, but normally Lake Forest doesn't like sliders. And why don't you turn some of the doors you have, because I don't know what these rooms are back here, can you turn those doors into French doors?
Well, one of the things is what we find is, I understand about the historic nature of a French door.
Yeah.
In the front elevation, it makes sense. From a practicality in a smaller house, actually, the in-swinging doors are pretty difficult to deal with. We've found that in the past. So that's why we like to use sliders.
Well, you're in the historic district.
In the rear elevation that you
In the
can't
rear
see,
elevation.
that you can't see anywhere from because of the fencing and the landscape.
But remember, you're in a fishbowl.
But in this
it's going to be
location,
seen.
if you look at the site plan, very difficult to see that door from anywhere. because of the courtyard, the fencing, then the screening. So
You know,
I guess what I'm saying is it's a functionality that we find most people, or a lot of people, want to have sliders versus French doors, just because of the impracticality of the swinging into the house.
I look at the elegance of it, I guess. So,
Yeah.
you know, and I look at what might be in a historic district in terms of compatibility to other homes that have French doors rather than sliders. I mean, the rest of the town, Yeah.
Actually, the house right across the street has a slider out into their patio.
okay. Okay, so those are windows. Now let's talk about dormers for a minute. The dormers on a colonial house, and I checked with both McAllister and also Get Your House Right and some other books. The dormers, let's take the north elevation. A lot of dormers in Lake Forest don't have it quite right. And you almost have it right here. Can you, you have the window and then you have the cheeks on either side. And the cheeks and the window normally are the width of the bottom window. In other words, those dormer windows and the dormers should be a lot smaller with Colonial Revival. Is it possible to perhaps relook at that, relook at the dormers, and perhaps make them a little bit more narrow? That's my question. And actually, on the whole house, the 3 dormers on the front, the 4 on the back.
I just want to pull it up so I can see exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. Take a look at the front dormers. Just pick one.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the proportion of the wall of the dormer itself has a minimum width to it, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
the cap, so what, I think that if you thought that should be an inch smaller or something, I think we could probably.
Well, actually,
work
on,
with that.
on colonial homes, or colonial revivals, you have the dormers. When you look at dormers on historic homes, you find that they're the window itself and the cheeks, the sides, where the insulation is, you know, the framing,
Yes.
would be the width of the window below it. In other words, these dormers are a little bit too big. They're not quite to scale. It's all proportional.
I see what you're saying. They align up. Actually, the windows below it look to me to be a little wider.
Whatever. This is, you know, this is something that I think you can go back and take a
Yeah,
look at.
I mean, I
you
would
know.
be happy to look
Okay,
at the
would
details
you?
and
Okay.
truly understand what you mean.
Okay.
You know, and it's sort of, I would think that we could work with staff to
Okay,
do
all right.
that.
And they have these books too, but I mean, I'm basing
Yeah, I mean,
it on
I'm a
several
little-
books.
Yeah,
I mean, just in
I'm
terms of
open to
making a
that.
good-looking
Sure,
house.
absolutely.
The other thing, and of course, my commissioners here are probably going to roll their eyes. The roof material. I'm sorry, the roof material. I was going to hit second. Every time somebody comes in front of us in the historic district and wants a standing seam roof, metal roof, my eyes roll, and along with theirs, because they're tired of hearing me talk about this, I'm sure. In Key West and other places in hurricane areas, they're actually asking for metal seamed roofs in some way because of the security, because of the hurricanes and all that. In other historic areas, they're not allowed. And so we have only allowed a few, and not at the front, okay, on the building. Now, there are a few here in town, and then I realized that there are types of metal roofs. And obviously, you have a 412 pitch on this, and on the cedar shingles, you have, I think, a 1212. Okay, so you can't do shingles on a 412. You know, it's just,
Yes, you
can you
could.
really?
Yeah, I
Can you
mean,
really?
that's kind of the minimum for a
No kidding, and
shingle
it's
roof.
what you have, right?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to do the shingles on
I think
that?
we would, again, I think if that were a super dominant thing, that we could look at the
Oh,
option of
please.
changing that.
Okay.
I know we had this discussion on another project
I
that
know
we
we
had
did.
before. I thought the house turned out terrific. I don't know if you thought
Well,
it.
there are there are metal scallops now that, and also rectangles that that I know builders or architects sometimes use in place of this barn-looking, what I think of as a barn-looking standing seam. And you have a pretty large section of it on the back of your house. On the front side, though, we don't want to see it. And so either a scalloped or a rectangle metal, and if you can do cedar on this, it would be wonderful. So just thinking about it.
We would look at the
look
option of
into
doing
it.
cedar
Okay.
on both of those, yeah.
The other thing is, why are the dormers on the rear coming into the, at this point, the standing seam? That's a pretty big standing seam. Is that because of the angle of the length of the roof?
It's how it fits into the section of the,
Okay.
if you look at the section.
On the east elevation, we don't see the dormer. We see a chimney, but there should be a dormer in
Could be
there,
a
I
dormer.
think.
Yeah, you'll see the side of that dormer,
Okay.
correct?
Same thing with with reducing the size of those dormers on the back end. Would you be,
Yeah, I mean, I think the same, we would carry that same detail around.
okay. Then the columns. You have columns and they're fairly thin, they're fairly
Yeah, I mean, the
narrow.
idea, this is a farmhouse type
Okay.
design, so that was the idea.
You
to
have,
a,
do you have
a
cap?
6x6 with a wood cap and
Okay,
base around those.
so you have capital and
Yeah,
plinth.
that's the idea that we would do that.
Okay. Have you thought about just a little bit bigger than that?
I think we could look at the possibility of adding the width to that.
Okay. On the, can you take a look at the cross-section of the house? It's on one of the pages here that, I'm having problems with it. It's when I say cross-section, we have, you see a gray, well, there it is on the lower left. Is that is the back end of that house all open area?
Yes.
And then is that a balcony that we see? Okay. What's upstairs? What's in that half story, 1.5 story?
3 bedrooms. You can see the floor plan right beside there.
Okay. Okay. All right.
One of the reasons that we were able to change the front window, what we had to double, was we were able to reorganize that plan so that we had enough light and vent into those bedrooms. That's a consideration that we have.
Okay. Are those dormers on the back, do they open?
The windows
The
would be
windows?
operable, yes.
Would anybody be able to reach them?
The ones in the lower level, no. I don't think that you'd probably be able to reach those. So I
Okay.
think that the thought is to have the consistent windows through there. But that adds light into that center space.
Okay. All right. I just didn't, I haven't seen that, so I don't think any of us. Has anybody seen that? Okay. All right. That's about enough on the house, I think, plenty. So once again, 14, the compatibility. I think the house has some potential to connect, and I actually, when I listened to Commissioner Dalliere talk about the brick, I thought, that might relate to the condo in the back, because I don't see a whole lot of relationship between this house and the condo, which I kind of would like to see. For example, I think the white chimney, and having it brick makes sense, because you have the kit of bricks and the kit of tools or whatever in your palette, and having that just plain, although I do think it sticks out very much like a sore thumb here. I would like to see it closer to the dormer, or to the roof line. And I think the brickwork, if you could do something in the brickwork in the house, rather than just have it all clapboard. Are the mullions going to be all black?
No, we're in the house.
Uh-huh.
No, they'd be white.
White?
That's what
Okay,
we- yeah.
good, okay. Because I had a question about that. And the barge board, the trim, on the back of the house, it looks like the garage, oh no, let me go to the front. Looks like the front, the trim is like much less deep than the trim on the rest of the house. In other words, are you doing that like taking it maybe by 3/4, a trim on the garage versus the house, the barge board there, or the soffit?
Are you talking about the fascia?
The
on
fascia,
end?
right,
Okay,
fascia.
Just make sure I understand your
Yeah.
terminology. I think the intent is that they would both be the same size as.
They would be the same,
size.
okay. And on the back of the house, sorry about this, with the columns, are the columns pilasters on part of that, or are they actual columns that stick out?
The one corner in the south corner, that's a porch, so that's a column that sticks out.
It's a column.
And the other side is an entrance porch, and so that sticks out, and there's a
So
column
do
there.
both of those come out?
There, if you look at the plan,
Oh, I see.
you see there.
Yeah, I see it
true
now.
columns,
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, can we go to the condo?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The condo is, and I think there've been a lot of good questions about that, in terms of the size of this. And I figured that we couldn't talk about the scale because of the PUD, and because it was, it was a whole development, that it was kind of off limits. Let me get my notes on the thing.
Did you want clarification from staff?
Yeah, can we talk about, to staff, can we talk about scale at all?
Scale of the structure is one of the 17 historic standards.
I know.
So that's certainly something you can address in the context
We
of
can.
the design review. But the overall, again, zoning aspects of the use of the building, things of that nature are still within the
Okay.
review of the plan commission.
All right. Before I get into that, before I get into the scale, this is more of a statement, and I hate to do this, but we've been dealing with the rooftop gardens for a long time, in terms of every time anything's come up, we've discussed, is this possible? Should this be happening? And it's not an indictment on anybody, it's for everybody's benefit to know what to do. And as a HPC member, we need direction. And, we'll follow the ordinances, whatever is there. So I spent quite a bit of time this last week on IBC, the International Building Codes, and looking at some of the things that have come out since 2018, and articles and our own ordinances and so forth. I would kind of like to make a plea to maybe the city council, maybe talk to people about, it would be nice to have something that actually defines where a rooftop garden could go. For example, and this is hypothetical, but let's say we have something as we're now going through CBD committees and so forth, there's going to be more development probably within the CBD. And there may be some possibilities for rooftop gardens, I don't know. But as a hypothetical example, let's say I used Chase Bank, and now it's a thriving bank, but it's at the corner of Illinois and Western. If that were to go into a condo at some point, and it's a flat roof, might that be a good example of a rooftop garden, because there are no single-family houses around? And so it wouldn't, I mean, it wouldn't be a problem. You have train east of it, and you have other businesses west and so forth. With this neighborhood, you have a lot of neighbors, single-family homes that are at the, looking up. You have the people at the rooftop gardens looking down, and there's noise, there's light, there are all kinds of things going on, and we've really struggled with this. It's not, we just want to make it right for everybody. And I guess I want to do the ask at some point, maybe sooner rather than later, that if the city and maybe the staff can work on something with a real ordinance to define, maybe in terms of distance or in terms of placement or whatever it is, so that we can get something that actually will work, that then it'll be easier for the petitioner, it'll be easier for the neighbors, and it'll be easier for the commissions that really deal with this. So that's my first ask for anybody who wants to answer. Second ask is, because this building, when I got on to the board, and I've been here longer than anybody, you had a mansard roof. And it was, when we were talking about it, one of the commissioners said, the mansard roofs are really difficult. We're not used to that. We're used to English Village, we're used to the Colonials and the Georgians and whatnot, and Tudors. And the mansard didn't quite work out, and you were very willing to change it to something else. And so the commissioner at the time said with me, or next to me, said, how about changing it from mansard to anything? How about trying maybe the building that you had, the two buildings you have, making it similar? So you went back and you did that. And then I realized I was not keen on that. I thought you had wanted it to be a little bit, this building 3, to be different from the others. Now, I know it is in terms of the mortar and the brickwork a bit, but it hasn't changed that much. In other words, even the fenestration, some of the other things are not, they're almost too much the same. And I just wondered if, the big ask is, if you would perhaps use a hipped roof on top of this and make it in keeping with the neighborhood, as opposed to the two buildings that are on McKinley.
No, I don't think we would consider that.
Okay.
I remember those meetings too, and so there
Been
was a
long
lot
ago.
there was a lot of things said on those. That was when we were looking at a 3-story building.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we went down to a 2-story building. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For that, I think just to go back to your comment about the roofs, I think we have made accommodations in terms of the plan and where the spaces are and the amount of landscaping on top of those roofs. We defined in the plans that we gave you to give some protection to the neighbors. So I don't think that, there has been thought to that too. And I would ask that you look at that and examine that.
Okay. What about, I know that Amberley Woods, and I haven't been out there for a while, but I did see a picture of it. Amberley Woods has balconies that actually are set back in, that I believe have walls, and they're set back into the building. In other words, so part of the floor space, I know of the condo, is really part of the balcony. And you do spend a lot of time outside, other than this week, in terms of being out on your balconies and so forth. Because of the light source coming out of your building, out of the building to the neighbors, would it be possible to reconsider and maybe think about maybe having some of the balconies, or redoing it so that you have balconies that are set in, so the light source isn't quite as strong? Are you following what I'm asking?
I am, but I'm not really following what you're saying. So you're saying recessed balconies into our floor plan. At this point, I don't think we would consider that.
Okay.
I think that that's one of the reasons the roofs really work, is because you do get this outside space. It really doesn't, that no one can see from the end down below. So I think that it does provide those outdoor spaces that we're having. The other thing is that, by having the roof spaces, you eliminate the need for balconies at the second floor level, which will be closer to the neighbor and have more pieces to it. So, you know, a lot of ways, the roofs work pretty well in terms of providing outdoor spaces for these living areas. Without, you know, I'm not sure I understand the ability for people to look over and see, you know, into the neighbors.
Actually, it's not as much that as it is noise or light.
What's the difference between the noise of someone being in their outside backyard versus being on a roof deck?
Well, in my case.
Six doesn't allow it to
Yeah.
go any different, right?
Okay,
It doesn't,
well-
when you have noise transmission, it doesn't have a vertical component. It's just as a distance.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I was at the library at 8:30 one night, and I was dropping a book off. It was in summertime, and I heard this loud music. And I thought, well, where's it coming from? It was coming from upstairs. Now, the neighbors have been actually quite neighborly, not calling the police, maybe not going over and asking the person to turn something down.
But, you know, there has been no, I mean, I take offense to that because I live there. There has been no complaints of any noise. There's not been any, you know, so that you come up with these things that are hypothetical, that you are there and you hear music on there. If someone has a window open into the building, if you have a window open in your house and you're playing music inside your house, you'll hear that music too. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any disturbance that have offended neighbors
Okay.
there. So, you know, and that's been well documented. That's not really part of the 17 standards that you're looking at.
I'm looking at, actually, I was really looking at compatibility of the building to the
Yeah,
to the
so
neighbors
these
with
are
it.
these are zoning issues which we've met in the plan commission. So I
Okay.
think we should focus on the 17 standards.
Well, I'm also looking at some of the balconies, the light source and other things coming out as well. I mean, I live next to Kelmscott, and thankfully, they have, and they were initially in the talking stages, they were even I have a 17, my ridge line is 17 feet on my house. And they were talking about, you know, the 4-story buildings. I mean, we got it down to 3-story plus a roof. Finally, I have the houses next to me, thankfully. But it's being kind of in that situation where you're there, and then suddenly another development comes in. I wasn't against the development. I'm certainly not against this development. I'm all for it, but it's the magnitude of it, it's the size of it, and what goes on, and especially with I was looking at the rooftop as something that I know we probably weren't supposed to discuss, but it's so overwhelming that I think that it needs to be discussed at some point. And I know it's come up in every talk we've had, so. Can you make more fenestration around your windows so you have a depth, as I believe Commissioner Pettit talked about articulation, and I'm talking about fenestration, a depth of fields so it works back, so you see brickwork.
So you feel that the other buildings have are shallow in terms of the depth of the return of the brick?
Yeah, I do a
You
little
do?
bit, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, our position is really that we meet the others, you know, that we match the other buildings. So I think, you know, the idea of doing that makes sense to us, is to keep the window in the same location as the other buildings.
All right, I also saw, well, the standards of 14 with the compatibility, and that was pretty much with the house, but it's also with the condo with the compatibility into the neighborhood. That was 1. The rhythm, number 4, and the materials and the texture, which I think you're going to change, hopefully you might look at in terms of cedar, with the cedar, the 412 pitch, that kind of takes
The
that
roofing
particular one.
material and the standing seam.
materials,
I
yeah.
think that
I think I'm
would be
okay with
option
that
for
now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Those are your questions. Thank you very much, Commissioner Gibson. We've been at this for about 2 hours. I'm just going to check in with city staff and also our attorney. Should we take a brief break before we get to the next piece, which would be public testimony? We also recognize that we have many people in the audience who would like to speak, and so my plan is not to delay that, but I just want to do a time check to see how people are doing. Mr. Whitmer has been standing there for the better part of 2 hours, and I just wanted to kind of do a quick,
It's completely
Check.
at the discretion of the commission. If you want to take a short break, I would say keep it short because there's a lot of people waiting to speak. But certainly, if you'd like to take a break, do so.
Commission, your thoughts?
Please.
Please. Okay, let's take a break. I think a 5-minute break, having done that several times or tried that in my professional career, it doesn't work, not with this many people and this few bathrooms. So let's take a 10-minute break by this clock, which actually is now a 9-minute break. We'll start at 25 minutes of 9 o'clock. Sharp. Sharp. Thank you very much.
Maureen, you didn't make your, Commissioner Canal, you didn't make your comment.
Oh, I have no additional comments. Okay. Yes. For those of you who may not have been aware, this is being televised, and the bell that I just positioned is to alert the folks back in the AV part of the house that they should begin recording again. We understand that some of you have mentioned that it's been difficult to hear, so Ms. Zerniak has pumped up the volume a little bit, hopefully without incurring feedback, that echo effect. Before we took the break, it would have been my turn to raise questions of either staff or of the petitioner. I have no additional questions or comments. So it's time now to go with the public testimony. There is a limit of 5 minutes per speaker. I do have several examples here of people who have requested to speak. And why don't we start with the ones that I have written, and then those who would want to speak after that will take you by name once you present yourself. If we could have each individual come up to the podium, speak into the microphone, introduce your name, if you are representing an organization or if you're representing yourself, and then also your place of residence, that would be very helpful. And we'll just continue that way. So thank you very much. This has been a very respectful forum. I'd like it to continue to be that way, which is a reminder of no cheering, no jeering, no high fives, just general listening and respect. And if you have heard a point made previously with another member of the public in their testimony, we'll try to keep repetition down to a minimum if possible. Thank you. I'm going to ask for Reed and Mara Daly first to come forward.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hi.
Just give me 1 second here. You guys can all follow along on the presentation if you want. Thanks, guys. Cool. So my wife and I are 385 East Westminster. We butt up against the adjacent property today. I think we're going to change it from the signs of block the box to block the L, and you'll see why. The kind of things that I want to talk about are relationship, size, and style, showcase the step up in size and proportion to the local community, impact on local residents in the historic district, and then other things I want to talk about is Christmas in July, NASCAR pileup, collaboration, and future plans for my property. All right, so the first thing I want to just show is representation of just cans. The idea here is that they all contain liquid, but they're not all the same, are they? So I kind of want to just show kind of the existing properties. So the first two buildings, obviously we're talking about building 3. From the designs I've seen, building 3 mimics a lot of what I'm seeing in building 1 and building 2. This is building 2, showing against a residence. Doesn't look the same to me. Rooftop, so this is building number 2, I believe. You'll see the rooftop golf course against my property. I didn't get a golf course, sorry. Once again, building number 2 against the Tarosian property there. Doesn't look the same to me. Rooftop view, Tarosian again. Now let's just talk about master plan. It's kind of like looking at properties or homes inside of a property. So the point of these next few slides is just to show scale in a historic district and compare like to the local community. So this was the original master plan. You see that it was a building adjacent to my property. I purposely am going to highlight the blue there. That's kind of the driveway there. It's just like a baseline for you guys. And obviously these are not to scale, but they are relative based on the submissions from the submitter. This is where it stepped up in 2021. This is what it looked like last time we talked. Now that's just the large building. That is not the home in front of it. This is what they look like together. Now, I'm more of a visual person, so when I look at this, I'm like, okay, I can see it steps up, but now I can see it really steps up. And now I can see it really step up. And I'm gonna go back here. One of the things that I did want to highlight on the 2022 proposal is the fact that, yes, there is a home in front of the Mass L, but there's also going to be a proposed home to the left of it if you're looking at the property. So we're gonna put two homes where one home used to be, and then we're gonna fit a large building behind it. So we're just gonna squeeze a bunch of stuff into a historic district. All right, now let's talk about, let's go through this. Christmas in July, my terms. So I don't have the exact window count, the drawings keep on changing, but let's say roughly 35 windows. I could have that wrong. This is what it's gonna look like here in terms of like, this is where the lights are gonna come in. And I just wanted to show that picture. So this is what I see today when I walk around my property. So I've got big TVs walking around on buildings 1 and 2. I've got metalscapes. I've got second and third story balconies. This is what I'm seeing at nighttime, okay? And when their trees are down in the wintertime, and let me tell you, all my trees got crushed. I mean, they've been there for 30 years and all of a sudden construction happens and I lost 30 trees. It's all gone. So all I'm seeing is bright lights. So that's what, we just got this picture tonight, so I did want to take a snapshot of this. So this is what I'm going to see from my 3 family room windows. So I will walk into my kitchen to have dinner with my 5-year-old, and I only know she's 5 because they started the construction project roughly when this was going, and now she's about this tall. So we're going to go there, we're going to have breakfast, I'm going to have my coffee and say, wow, I bought a house in the historic district. Awesome. So many lights, so many neighbors. And then I'll get to see rooftops, and I'll see golf, and then I'll see plants, because they're going to be plants. So I've run out of my time, I guess. But this was the start of my presentation. I'll leave you guys with the last thing. The proposed garage is something that we are going to be bringing to you guys. This is just a little sneak peek of what I'm thinking. Based on the design, it will fit within the L. I'm gonna go with the brick look and the rooftop. Thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daly. Okay, next up we have John Johnson. I believe he is representing the Lake Forest Library.
Thank you, Chair Grinnell and Commissioners. My name is John Johnson. I live at 110 West Blackthorn Lane in Lake Forest. I am on the library board now for the 3rd year, serving as president for the 2nd year. So I wanted to read a letter that was sent and then make a few brief closing comments. So we've sent this letter from the library board, and all trustees had comments they wanted to make. So just imagine all of you trying to agree on a letter that you're going to send to the world. And I was proud of the trustees that we got this done. So this is to each one of you as commissioners. It was to the mayor, city council, Jason Wisha, Kathy Cerniak, director of community development, and all of the Lake Forest residents. While the Lake Forest Library Board understands the settlement agreement as discussed and approved by City Council on October 17, 2022, between the city and the developer, we would like to encourage further review of the council discussion, including the public comments. We support the upcoming work of the Historic Preservation Commission and the Plan Commission to carefully consider the Phase 3 site plan as presented within the settlement agreement. In particular, we would encourage the Plan Commission to carefully analyze and review the building massing, scale, setbacks in relation to other buildings, Church of the Covenant and the Lake Forest Library. And we concur with the mayor and city council that the Historic Preservation Commission have an opportunity to influence the open space near the pedestrian access to the library as part of the thoughtful consideration of the 705 building open space. The library board is disappointed by the loss of the parking spaces as part of the October 17, 2022 settlement agreement reached by the city. We encourage the City Council, City staff, Historic Preservation Commission, and Plan Commission to be aware of the impact that this space has, not only on parking, which in all of our surveys from the community have indicated a need, but also on the potential future library plans to expand our services as desired by the Lake Forest community, including but not limited to user space, building use, and landscaping. We notice that the location of Outlot B and have heard the intended purpose is green space, setback space. Given the proximity of Outlet B and the proximity of the library northern lot line to residential development, we would welcome any opportunity to discuss acquisition of part of this area. If there's any time to work collaboratively with our neighbors, our library board would like to have a discussion. It's the southeast corner of Outlot B that is the pinch point for traffic flow around the building. It's single lane. We have heavy traffic because of drop-off of library books, and we have heavy traffic because of drop-off of book sale books. And it's the only way to get around the library. So even for other reasons, shipments, drop-offs, garbage pickup, etc. We appreciate that we have a northern neighbor. We want to be collaborative in every way that we can. And we want to be sure that the open space that's being planned looks like it was planned as part of a community and not just two separate lots. We have 3 drop-off boxes right now where people drop off books. We have the dock for loading and unloading. It is not the most attractive side of our building. In fact, when you're doing a family portrait, you go to the front of the library, which is the iconic part of the library. You never would take a picture with your family in the back. So this back is exposed now to our northern neighbor. It's not the prettiest part of the library. And we have some functional changes we need to think about in the future. So we just wanted to make you aware of that. Because you had approved with a certificate in May, the construction of the dome is moving along. We have found a contractor, and at our last board meeting last week, we have chosen one. We'll be signing a contract soon. So we expect construction to be in the spring and in the summer. So that's an update. We appreciate your time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Next, we have also, I believe, from the library, Heather Strong.
Good evening, Commission, staff, neighbors, petitioners. My name is Heather Strong. I live at 230 North Mayflower Road. I am an architect, and I'm also on the Library Board of Trustees serving on the Building Committee. So the dome project that you just heard about, I'm an integral part of that. So I just wanted to ask the Commission, when they are considering Standard 1 and Standard 10, which I believe are the height and the scale of the buildings, on the height chart, it lists that the height of the library is 48.2 feet, which is a true statement, but that is at the very tip top of our dome. And so that point at the top of the dome, which is the skylight, it's less than 10 feet in diameter. The whole rotunda is roughly 30 by 30 feet, so 30 by, can't do the math, 30 times 30, you do the math, less than 1,000 square feet of our 28,000 square foot library is above 30 feet. The majority of our roof line is under 28 feet, and I know that because we walk across the highest part of the roof to enter the hatch to get into the dome, which is another 10 feet above that. So just when we talk about perception of the elevation and that kind of thing, perception of scale and height is the height of the library is only 48 feet at that one tiny point, and the vast majority of our elevations are under 28 feet. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you very much. Okay, why don't we hear from Jeff Tarosian?
Good evening, Jeff Tarosian at 401 East Westminster. Few clarifications on some of the questions that Commissioner Culbertson, you asked city staff, I believe. You asked about the 2016 master plan. I think it was to the petitioner actually, and you asked what changed, why are we not there? And the answer you got is it got bigger. I will tell you the 2016 master plan contemplated townhomes in the smaller footprint that you saw in that plan that Mr. Daly presented on the screen. Even with the smaller footprint, it was contemplated at that time that they would be townhomes, two-story townhomes, no rooftop decks. And the answer you got to your question was, oh, what changed? Oh, well, it got bigger. That's what changed. That's the answer you got. There was no rational reason why it got changed. It just got a heck of a lot bigger. Building 2 got bigger because they were able to buy some extra land, and the whole project got bigger. So there was no change to the single-family house because that was always contemplated on Westminster as part of the 2016 master plan. As to your other question about the PUD in April 2021, remember, plan denied that, rejected that plan, and then it got appealed to City Council. And what City Council did is it approved the zoning change to the 38 feet on the property to the east, and it approved moving the lot line and disappearing the lot line between the 2 properties that are now the city property. Used to be phase 3 and phase 4. They disappeared that lot line. So that's all City Council did in overruling plan in April 2021. It did not in any way approve this monstrosity of a building, which I think you know, but I just wanted to clarify from the questions that you asked. I didn't think the staff and the city attorney gave you the correct answer on that. And we've lived this, the city attorney has not, so obviously he's forgiven for not remembering this correctly. You have heard a lot of things, and you're going to hear a lot more from the community, and I think we're all on the same page. I'm not really that worried about that. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Unlike us, we could just get up here and complain about things. You have to actually make a decision. You have 3 choices. You can grant this petition, and that would obviously be a huge mistake. If you grant this petition, the Historic Preservation Commission is done. There's no way you're going to win a challenge to any petition in the Historic District going forward after granting this one. It will never happen. You'll lose in court every time. And I know after I sit down, someone will ask the city attorney, hey, is that true? And he'll say something. He lost the last case, and it wasn't in the Historic District. Believe me when I tell you, if this petition is granted, you will lose every challenge to a result, to a denial in the Historic District going forward. Forget about just rooftops. Rooftops, there's no way you're going to be able to deny a rooftop in the Historic District if you grant this one. But everything else about this petition is so obviously not in keeping with the Historic District, you will lose every challenge going forward because it's going to be arbitrary and capricious, which is exactly why Kurt lost the last trial. You could, secondly, deny this petition outright. And we all know what's going to happen. They're going to appeal that to the City Council. And they could do that. This would probably be my choice if I were sitting in your shoes and had these three choices in front of me. And the reason is your standards are non-negotiable. That's what makes this city different than every other city. Your standards of the Historic Preservation Commission are non-negotiable. If City Council wants to give this property away for free, and let's be clear about this for everyone watching on TV, because I got a lot of calls, City Council is giving city property to a developer for free. If City Council wants to do that, in order to get this project in place, then City Council has to own that. This is their property. When they all move to Naples and they're thinking about the good they did in the city of Lake Forest, let them think about this property and not try to pin it on you, because that's what they're trying to do. They said at the City Council meeting, we're not approving this plan. We're not even opining on this plan. We're just allowing this petitioner to make it your problem. Because they want to say, well, HPC approved it. I didn't have anything to do with it. I would deny it and make City Council own this decision. The last choice you have, if I can go, you allowed the petitioner to go over a little bit, and I'd like to go over another minute. The last choice you have is probably the best choice, is to continue this and allow this petitioner a chance to address the 6 years of concerns that we've had. I don't think this petitioner has it in him. The way he dressed down Commissioner Gibson in the questioning shows he doesn't have the respect for the commission or the neighborhood to actually address the concerns that we have been a broken record on from day one. No rooftops, keep it in the footprint of the master plan, 2 stories, make it look nice. The best thing that they can say after bringing their lawyer to a building hearing, the best thing they could say is, hopefully not that many people will see it. That is a terrible standard for building a building in the historic district. Hopefully no one will see it. Maybe if we build other buildings in front of it bigger, hopefully no one will see it. But if this petitioner has it in him to come back before you at a continued hearing date with no rooftops, no backward base of the L, 2 stories, lower, and a better looking building, then I say let him try. But this commission's standards should be non-negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trozian. Next up, Sally Downey.
Good evening. I'm Sally Downey. I'm at 475 East Westminster, and I have lived here in Lake Forest for almost my entire life. My focus tonight is on the rooftops and why they should never be allowed in the historic district, especially in a residential area. Let's go back to November 3rd, 2016, when Mr. Whitmer was presenting Condo 1 on McKinley to the Building Review Board. He said, quote, that the roof is a defining part of the design, and explained the intent to offer usable outdoor space on the roof, which is a feature that is not offered in the Lake Forest housing market. This differs greatly from the staff's report tonight that states they are found on various types of buildings throughout the community. I'm curious as to where they are. Whitmer also stated in November of 2016 that the rooftop mechanicals will be screened by the parapet roof, and explained that the penthouses will be designed to disappear, unquote. He noted, quote, that the rooftop living space will be on the internal portion of the roof, noting that the configuration allows for more privacy and more space, unquote. Well, in the staff report tonight that I highlighted for you on the first page, It says that in response to concern about impacts on neighboring properties, the hardscape will be centrally located and away from the building's edges. Same exact promise in 2022 as was made in 2016. At the December 7th, 2016 BRB meeting, Mr. Whitmer also noted that, quote, the penthouses are somewhat visible from the train station, unquote. Commissioners, I invite you to look at the photos I gave you taken over the past few years and even today, showing that the massive penthouse brick structure does not disappear, nor does the furniture or the umbrellas, and don't get me started on the balconies or the leafless trees that mask nothing. According to tonight's staff report, it states, quote, that the penthouses do not qualify as a story, unquote, but they read as a story and you can see them from every single direction from blocks away. Once again, I ask that you refer to the photos. I've included in my packet the Chicago City Codes and the International Building Codes, which appear to categorize similar spaces as stories. Does Lake Forest have separate codes? I couldn't find them. There are also codes regarding egress and fire safety, which was mentioned last week by a plan commissioner for the second time, and also in a letter. I certainly hope these buildings meet or exceed those codes. In summary, this proposed condo is in a historic residential district where development of any kind must meet the highest of standards. Do not let a lawsuit or pressure from city lawyers or the worry that the city council will overturn you again keep you from doing your job. Follow the 17 standards and keep in mind the words used by Ms. Cerniak and Mr. Whitmer in 2016. Ms. Cerniak explained, quote, that approval of the first building will establish a context for future buildings, but will not set a precedent for massing, roof forms, building heights, or building design, unquote. Mr. Whitmer followed with, quote, there is a large buffer between this building and the neighbors, but agreed the appropriateness of rooftop spaces on later buildings may create a privacy issue. We ask for no rooftops. Number 2, shrink the building. Number 3, no balconies on the east-facing side. Number 4, a guarantee that the Westminster House will be built. And we respectfully ask the following questions be answered either tonight or after further research. Without the answers, we should not move forward. I've included them in your packet. Number 1, where are the current building and zoning codes that allow rooftop patios? Number 2, how far away is the hardscape, meaning the brick structure and patio hardscape, from the building's edge on condo 102? And how far is the developer proposing it will be on condo 3? Number 3, how can we guarantee it will stay in the center when condos 1 and 2 reflect otherwise? Number 4, where are the other rooftop patios around the city? Please give specific examples that the city keeps referencing as comparisons. Number 5, where in the city regulations does it say that rooftop patios, terraces are not considered another story? Number 6, staff says it is rare for anyone to see furniture on roofs, but on condo 1 and 2, the furniture and umbrellas can be seen from most angles. What rules pertain to enforce the neighborhood so that the neighborhood doesn't see the mechanicals and the furniture? Your expertise and your commission are the only guardians we have to preserve and protect our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Downing. All right. Next up, Rami Lopat.
Good evening. My name is Rami Lopat, and I live at 410 East Woodland Road. First of all, thanks for volunteering for what can be a very tough job. If you haven't heard it lately, we all very much appreciate your work. I've been watching this particular project since 2016, which is when the City Council's Property and Public Lands Committee, the PPL, decided to sell these two city-owned lots to developers Altunian and Whitmer, who had bought 2 adjacent office buildings on McKinley and wanted to redevelop them into condo buildings. The PPL's confidential purchase and sale agreement, the PSA, finally came to light last year after Mr. Altunian and Whitmer sued the city in testifiers. Anyway, the PSA had many major flaws, including not putting the property up for bid and letting Mr. Altunian and Whitmer be the highest bidder if they wished. Another flaw of the PSA was to promote the to promise, the developers that they could build 14 units in Condo 3 as part of a planned multifamily development. Where did the number 14 come from at that very, very early date? Well before a master plan incorporating Condo 3 was even approved. I think that was in 2019. That said, what can we say now about the settlement plan that's before you tonight? 7 or 8 condos are now proposed for Phase 3. That sounds like a great big sacrifice by the developers since they were promised 14 condos by the City Council and the PSA. But these units are in 2 large buildings comprising 25,000 square feet together on about 31,000 square feet of property that fronts on a historic district of beautiful single-family homes, not to mention crowding up against the immediate backyard of our incredibly elegant 1931 Georgian-style library. This settlement plan puts the Plan Commission and the HPC in the uncomfortable position of rejecting Condo 3's mass and scale, visual compatibility and roof shape, and materials, and the house, in my estimation, based on at least standards 8, 10, and 14. This time with a lawsuit settlement in the balance. But to decide otherwise would compromise the HPC's integrity. Actually, I don't even understand why Mr. Whitmer continues to make Condo 3, quote, identical to Condos 1 and 2 when he's been told over and over not to. In fact, he's referenced using a kit of parts from Condos 1 and 2 repeatedly. In fact, he and Ms. Cerniak both said that Condo 3 would appear as it developed over time, end quote. But it doesn't. I just don't get it. And the schematic Condo 4 design, well, it's good to finally have a condo. Or is it a house? Anyway, on Westminster. But this one's right out of a builder's catalog. Surely we can do better. In fact, Commissioner Dallier, I would say don't raise the garage roof. Lower the condo. In fact, in your packet tonight, staff says detailed drawings of the single-family home have not yet been proposed. So I would like clarification if this is a schematic that you're approving and it will come back in much more detail. In addition, I continue to have questions about the number of units allowed in this plan development via the original and revised special use permit staff report, which omitted the 7th standard, G, which says that the plan development shall conform to the GR3 district zoning standards. Ms. Cerniak called the omission an accidental oversight and told the Plan Commission that density was addressed in the PSA and that 14 units is consistent with the plan development, quote, not exactly conforming to all other requirements. So I ask again, was the number of units arbitrarily derived in the PSA, or was there a 2016 calculation? Was Mr. Whitmer's 2021 request to depart, his words, from the City Code's bulk and lot coverage standards submitted in his petitions, verified by staff, and approved by Plan, or HPC? What's the total number of units allowed in this total land area? I put in a FOIA request 2 weeks ago for the calculations, but got crickets in response. But I will continue to pursue answers to those lot coverage and unit number standards, and I hope you will too, because they go to the scale of the Condo 3 building. Maybe by your next meeting, we'll be able to say what the right unit and land coverage numbers are for the entire 2-acre planned multifamily development in this GR3 district. My only intention is to make doubly sure that the rules are followed and that the city reviews are impartial and comprehensive. That's been a problem, in my opinion, for 6 years. All that said, my ask of you is to take your time in reviewing the many design and compatibility questions. I sent you many myself this afternoon that deserve close scrutiny even now, especially now. Continue this hearing, if need be, to run down each standard in full. Hang in there with upholding our fair and well-tested certificate of appropriateness standards. Thank you for so much and for letting me run over, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lopat. I have one more who has also identified herself. That would be Susie Athenson. with the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation? If there are others, I'll ask for them after Ms. Athison has completed her remarks.
Good evening, Chairman Grinnell and Commissioners. I am Susan Athenson. I'm president of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, and I am representing the Preservation Foundation tonight. Earlier today, the foundation sent you our opinion regarding the proposed certificate of appropriateness for Phase 3 of the McKinley Road development. It was quite lengthy, so I will summarize our opinion for you. And I apologize for reading, but I want to make sure I keep within our 5-minute timeline. So Building 3, the condominium building. The Historic Preservation Ordinance Standards 1 through 11 all specifically state that a proposed building and its features shall be, quote, visually compatible with the properties, structures, sites, public ways, objects, or places to which the proposed construction is visually related, unquote. Based on this Historic Preservation Ordinance, Building 3 does not comply with Standards 1, height, 8, roof shape, and 10, scale and mass, nor does it comply with Standards 2 through 6, 8, 9, and 11, but we will focus on 1, 8, and 10. Building 3 is located in the East Lake Forest Historic District, surrounded by historic homes to the east and north and the library to south. Despite this location, no effort has been made to make Building 3 visually compatible with the historic buildings that surround it on Westminster. It is a modern building that is modeled after Buildings 1 and 2, which are outside the East Lake Forest Historic District and not visually related to the Westminster streetscape. Building 3 appears overbearing because, as members of the HPC have previously commented, quote, it is a 2-story structure in name only, with a 3rd-floor rooftop living space that is incompatible with the 2 and 2.5-story single-family homes to the east, west, and north. While Building 3 is 35 feet at its highest point, it has rooftop living, which includes large and highly visible penthouses, trellises, and hardscapes, and no limitations on the height of rooftop plantings, umbrellas, screens, or other furnishings of decor that may well exceed 35 feet. Under the IBC, International Building Code, the planned rooftop for Building 3 would be considered a 3rd floor because it includes trellises and contemplates items over 48 inches, such as penthouses, umbrellas, and trees. For reference, see IBC reference 503.1.4 and 1510.2. The Lake Forest Preservation Foundation is aware of no structures which have penthouses and rooftop living in the historic district near Building 3. In addition, Lake Forest Preservation Foundation is not aware of any City of Lake Forest ordinance that allows rooftop decks in the historic district. Compounding the height problem is the scale and mass. At 21,496 square feet, Building 3 will dwarf the homes surrounding it, including the 3,500 square foot Building 4 that is intended to screen it from Westminster. Put simply, Building 3 looks like what it is, a large, modern condominium building shoehorned into a historic residential neighborhood. Building 4, the single-family home. As for preserving Westminster's historic streetscape, Building 4 fails to do so because it does not comply with Standard 2, proportion of front facade, and as a result, Standards 4, rhythm of solids to voids in front facade, and 5, rhythm of spacing. The central reason that Building 4 does not comply with Standards 2, 4, and 5 is because, unlike most houses on Westminster, its front elevation includes an attached garage, which adds 24 feet of width. Typically, the historic homes on Westminster have detached garages that sit behind the houses. In addition, the garage for Building 4 exits right next to the ramp for the underground parking for Building 3, which itself is directly across from the parking exit for another large condominium, 333 East Westminster. Put simply, all 3 buildings are exiting and entering a narrow alley at roughly the same point. This is a safety concern that the City of Lake Forest typically addresses by requiring staggered driveways. The Lake Forest Preservation Foundation suggests moving the underground parking entrance for Building 3 from its current location toward the other end or south end of the building, in line with the drive between Buildings 1 and 2. This move would achieve the following objectives: eliminate the safety concern posed by the 3 driveways entering and exiting the alley at the same point, permit the garage on the single-family home, Building 4, to be detached and moved to the rear of the house, which could then be centered on the lot, thereby reducing the ratio of the width to the height to be more consistent with the surrounding homes. Reduce the traffic on Westminster, and allow for more robust evergreen plantings to screen the north elevation of Building 3 from Westminster, which is currently not possible because of the driveway location. I'm almost done. Our recommendation for conditions the HPC should add include move the underground driveway entrance on Building 3 to the other end of the building in line with the drives between Buildings 1 and 2 to prevent a safety and traffic issue. Move the garage on Building 4 behind the house and center the house on the lot. Eliminate the outdoor rooftop living space, which is highly visible from all elevation and is incompatible with the historic single-family homes in the area. Considered a pitch roof with no living space to be compatible with the single-family homes on Westminster. Reduce the size of the portion of Building 3 that is behind Building 4 so that it does not overpower the proposed new home on Westminster, and increase the depth of the lot for that home to be compatible with 373 and other Westminster homes. Substantially upgrade the landscaping along the east and north elevations on both sides of the property line to screen Building 3 from adjoining properties. Require that Building 4 be built before Building 3 by conditioning the issue of the certificate of occupancy for Building 3 on having the exterior, including foundation, sides, and roof of the Building 4, completed. Bar any further encroachment or reduction of the 373 Westminster lot to further expand or accommodate Building 3, and reserve all authority to ensure that these conditions are satisfied. We ask the Historic Preservation Commission to continue the petition to allow the petitioner time to address these issues and design a home and condo building that meets the Historic Preservation Ordinance standards and is compatible with the historic Westminster streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atherson. Do we have anyone else who plans to come forward? Mr. Psitnik.
My name is Jim Upsitnik. I'm speaking for myself, not the Preservation Foundation, even though I am on the board. We've been involved with this process, and certainly the commissioners much longer than I, but this seems like it's been an eternity. And it seems like what's happening, and we're trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. We have the guidelines, we have the standards, you have the neighbors, you have a historic district, and now someone wants to come along and plunk down a modern brick building with way too many windows looking over private residences. Maybe there's a consideration by the city council, for example, well, gee, the additional tax revenues will be wonderful for the city because of the property. But if you consider that in the last 18 months to 2 years, there's been a 20% increase or change in the Lake Forest population of people moving here because of its desirability and livability and the qualities of life that it's offered here. And they're buying older homes and restoring them. I just talked to a lady last week, spent $650,000 for a new slate roof and copper gutters on her home. Now, if you apply that, not that amount, but if you apply the upgrades across the many homes that are being upgraded, and I hear from so many contractors and restoration people that people are doing this to their home, many of them because they were locked in during COVID and said, gee, we need to do something here. So this increases the value of all the properties in Lake Forest. And to me, a development like this, Building 3, where they want to put it, does not enhance the community at all. It provides living space, it provides a good return on investment for the developers, but does it visually enhance Lake Forest? And frankly, I don't believe it does. So I hope you do not vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Upsitnik. Is there anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Courtney McGovern, and I reside at 79 North Mayflower. And I appreciate the time that you all have committed to this evening's hearings and for all the comments that were made from those attending. And I just want to reinforce much of what was already said. But my comment really is just around reinforcing the concern of precedent. And I think it is unfortunate that the city council changed the zoning in order to accommodate this, because I don't see how this precludes any other developer coming into Lake Forest and into the historic districts where there are large developable lots, and doing a very similar thing. And so I agree with the gentleman who said, you know, you're never going to win that argument in court when you have basically said, you know, we're sidestepping all of this. And it's unfortunate given the history of this town and the incredible history of the historic homes that are in this town. And I'm sorry to see this precedent potentially, or this situation potentially become a precedent for the rest of the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGovern. Is there anyone else? Okay, just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone. All right. That then concludes the comments from public testimony. What final questions does the commission have to either the petitioner or the staff, or direction to the petitioner and staff to provide additional information? And I look to you, commissioners, for that input. Commissioner Culbertson.
Yes, staff, I'd like to ask, the question was asked, will the single-family home design come back for closer examination by the commission? Or is this what?
It's really up to the commission. The recommendation is to proceed with action tonight, but certainly the commission has the ability to approve, deny, or continue.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll ask the petitioner quite simply, are there aspects of your plan that you would consider for redesign?
I think, the only thing that we would really look at is what we talked about with Commissioner Gibson in the single-family house in terms of changing the roofing material or minor modifications to the columns. I think those are the things reasonable. Other changes we would not consider.
That's all I have.
Okay. Additional questions, either for staff or to the petitioner from my fellow commissioners? I don't hear any. Okay. Do we have anything else in terms of petitioner rebuttal, Mr. Whitmer?
No, I'd just like to, sort of restate the last statement is that, we would really ask the commission to vote on what we have in this proposal, because at this point, we're really not in a position where we would modify the existing plan. So we would ask if the commission voted up or down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, additional response from staff.
I wanted to note that the technical aspects of any plan will be reviewed at the time full construction plans are submitted for permit, as occurs with any petition. So with respect to the technical aspects of, for instance, rooftop living space, the international code does allow rooftop spaces. Like everything else, like the units themselves, there are some limitations on distance from accesses, ingress and egress, and all of that is looked at by our technical staff, and unless technical code requirements are met, permits will not be issued, or plans will need to be modified. If they were modified significantly in exterior appearance, they would come back to the Historic Preservation Commission. But all of the time, we deal with reviewing plans, sending out comments, having modification to all sorts of aspects that, from a technical standpoint, need to conform to the code.
I guess I would have a question then at this point. Are there any elements of what's been proposed by the petitioner that you would question being appropriate from a technical review standpoint?
Again, we don't have completed
don't have
construction
complete.
drawings.
Okay.
But, so I cannot speak from a technical perspective. I can say, based on what we have, there are no obvious inconsistencies with the technical requirements of the code. But again, we don't have all of the information.
Okay, all right. Commission, oh, go ahead.
I'd just like a clarification from the petitioner, actually, if I may. I
Sure.
know it's a little out of line, but you said you wouldn't consider any redesigned considerations other than those that were mentioned by Commissioner Gibson. How about the ones that are contained in the staff report?
Yes, I think we're in agreement with what is in the staff report for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. Commission discussion and comment. I would suggest that each of you be prepared to discuss your thoughts regarding the standards, the 17 standards that we are bound to respond to. We've heard quite a bit over the last 3 hours, and I'm sure you'll do your best to distill it into the pieces that you have listened to and have also researched and have explored on your own. Who'd like to start? Okay, there being no one who's quite volunteered for that, we'll start, Ms. Commissioner Pettit will take the lead.
Based on the limited elements we got to review, and the conversations this evening, the 5 standards that I feel are least met are standards 5, 7, 8, 10, and 11. And I have to say, I'm disappointed that there doesn't seem to be a compromise on the horizon. So those are my comments.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I wrote a note to myself while all of this was going on, and the note was, I'm not willing to give up. I may deviate from that right now, but I want to work with the petitioner on this to get it right, and it's not right yet. I have, well, number 7 was resolved in my mind about materials. I'm okay with that. I actually added a standard 1 on height, and that was after hearing really strong talk about this in terms of the majority of that library, which we love so dearly, is really under 28 feet. And that with the building, the modern building, that we all know it's modern, we all know it matches the other two, so we can't mince words on that, but it really doesn't fit, and that library is so important in terms of the view of it, it's the heart of the city right there. So I'm adding height on that, and which I actually hadn't before. I thought, well, the height is 33, okay, we're okay with that. And I knew that the rooftop and the penthouse was going to be another 9 and whatnot. The compatibility, I still have a problem with this. It's a non-farmhouse colonial revival sort of building that is not truly that we're trying to make it a little more colonial. But it's the compatibility of that to the streetscape, which I love the fact that a house is in front. I love that. Okay, that's where it should have been. The building itself is not to scale, so there's number 10, but the compatibility of the house to the condo, of the condo to the single-family homes, we've seen it morph, and we have 14 and 10 still hanging out there. The roof, I think the roof of the house, I don't want to see the house smaller, because I don't necessarily need to have the garage bigger, but I think that the roof line is the roof itself is wrong, and I also think that that's one of them, maybe number 4, about the rhythm. Way too many windows on the condo, and actually, it's the fenestration that bothers me on the building 3. I agree, by the way, I really agree with preservation and a lot of other people talking about the driveway problems. And I don't understand why that driveway for the building can't be moved, and therefore the basically screening and more room for the front house be adjusted. The drive into the condo should be way in the back, kind of out of the way, having 3 driveways there. I know it might be zoning, but I think just the aesthetics is wrong. The building, the 3rd building should have been something, or it should be something different, really different from the other 2. It really shouldn't be matched. I mean, the brickwork is fine. I mean, the brickwork can be the same brick, but we've played around with this long enough, but it's a shame. And just one comment about vegetation, and I know this comes up later, but the evergreens when I looked at the vegetation plan, there were 2 sheets that came to us a little bit late, or, they came before the meeting, but they were about landscaping. And I was looking for evergreens somewhere. Instead, I got hydrangeas, and I got boxwood, and redbud, and lilacs. And I thought, no, wait a minute. I was lucky to have a developer give me, even though I lost all my trees as well to flooding from the Kelmscott, but I was given, I don't know whether they're Great Westerns, but they're big thujas, okay, basically, that are put in, and they screen nicely. And so I'm not sure there's enough room for that, but still I don't see evergreens along that eastern border, which could be done later. That was explained by staff. So, but I just want to point that out, that they should be, and certainly, I don't particularly care for a petitioner giving me the condo look with all of the evergreens on the front. I can't even see the windows, on the paper. So I'd like to, for future petitions, I'd like to see it without all of the vegetation, or at least the pictures of the vegetation. I'm hearing everybody, and I think we should have, just as Ms. Slomat said, perhaps a discussion of the right unit coverage, of the units on the property. I think that's valid. I don't know whether we've had a discussion of that. So, I don't know. I'm torn. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Valier?
Okay, I can concur with all the comments made by my other commissioners on all the standards that are not met. I do agree with all of them, so I'm not going to go into detail since it's 9:35. But I would like to say it's disappointing. I mean, it's a situation where if there were any other petitioner who presented us a house with this, we would obviously, not grant it if they didn't meet all these standards. So I don't know why in this situation we could say yes if we are all saying that they aren't meeting these standards and if the petitioner is in fact saying they're not willing to change anything. So I feel disappointed in that, but that is the situation, and that is why we have a Historic Preservation Commission, and that is why this is a historic neighborhood and not just an ordinary neighborhood. So there are additional requirements made, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I were to simply let things pass that aren't meeting standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Valier. Commissioner Culbertson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first off, I'm not considering any of the legal issues. That's really not, it's been mentioned a number of times, but it's really not within the purview of this commission. We're pretty much strictly bound to considering the appropriateness of the project as it is measured against the standards. And I will try to do that. I really sincerely wish that we were still considering a footprint that was contained in the 2016 master plan, because it was a proposal that all the parties could accept. Maybe not, it wasn't perfection for anybody, but it was acceptable. And this plan morphed over time into a bigger, more massive project for Phase 3. As such, in considering the standards of appropriateness, it's standard number 10 that just I can't get around. I think it's too big. I think it's compatible with the West, but the West isn't in the historic district. Phase 3 is in the historic district. And if it's going to be biased with compatibility, it should be to the east. And I don't think there's sufficient a sufficient transition in favor of the historic district and the residences to the east of this project to justify compatibility with the neighborhood. So in view of those conditions that we're bound to consider as a commission, and given the fact that the petitioner is insisting on an up and down based on the up or down vote based on the project as it is before us, I'm in a hard place to approve a certificate of appropriateness.
Thank you,
Those are my
Commissioner
thoughts.
Culbertson. One of the advantages or disadvantages, I guess, that I have as chair in hearing everyone is to sort things out and come up with my own perspective on this. One of the things that speaks to me is the role of the Historic Preservation Commission. We are here with city staff to ensure that all interests and concerns of property owners, neighbors, architects, historians, and the community at large are heard and considered. And then we review this against the standards. And I think that Commissioner Culbertson said it very well. The standard that stands out the most of being the least addressed is standard 10. There is no compatibility with the east. There is compatibility with the west, but that was not the expectation or the desire. I see that this it has major ramifications going forward. I'm putting the legality issue of this aside. I'm also putting aside the fact that there's a lot of fatigue over this. There have been many meetings. This was pointed out in the Plan Commission meeting last week. There have been like over almost close to 40 meetings. Many of you have appeared several times. The petitioner has gone back and forth with various modifications. We recognize that. But I would be consistent with my fellow commissioners in saying that with the lack of total information, with very short time periods in which to examine all of the avenues, and being disappointed by asking what is possible, what could be changed, what could be modified, and hearing very little, I have a real concern with approval. So, is there a motion that anyone would venture to make? Commissioner Dallier.
Gotta get my thing. Okay. What is this thing called? McKinley Road Development. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes?
Okay.
Okay, I think, oh, sure. Are you all right with that?
Lloyd, you're a professional. Go for it.
I'm a ranking.
So polite.
I'm not a professional. I'm going to try this on for size, and let me know if you want to amend it in any way. I move that we deny the certificate of appropriateness for this petition, but subject or to the possibility that the petitioner would agree to a continuance that would consider further modifications to the proposal, with a goal of getting to a point where we could abide by the standards and approve a certificate of
Question,
appropriateness.
is that legal to do?
So, given that the petitioners already said that they don't plan to submit a revised plan,
Right.
or to, I guess, submit revised plans in response to the commission's
Right.
comments, I would say that's not really an appropriate
Viable.
condition at
Okay.
this point.
So I'll amend the motion. I'll simply say, in view of the discussion amongst the commissioners this evening, I move that we not approve the certificate of appropriateness for this petition.
I second. Second.
All right, at this point, I think we would need a roll call vote, is that correct?
We just want to
Mr.
clarify the motion. Did it incorporate the commission's deliberations as the findings on the standards there as well? Just so that we know.
Yeah, right,
Yes.
yes.
We state the
We didn't- no, we don't have to
standards and
state them, we've already stated them.
We've stated
Right.
them, do we need to restate them again? Okay.
No, I think as long as the motion's clear that we're incorporating the commission's deliberations on those standards as their findings
Okay.
relating to those, I think then.
We'll include that in the motion.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have a second with that?
You
I
have a
second.
second, right. And then I believe we need a roll call vote, correct?
Sure. Commissioner Dellier?
And just to be
Voting
clear,
for the denial.
Yes,
you
voting
would
for the
be
denial.
for the denial? if
Yes,
you
for
say
the
yes.
denial.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to make clear what I'm saying correctly. Okay, yes.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Pettit?
Aye.
Commissioner Culbertson?
Aye.
And Chairman Grinnell?
Aye.
5 ayes. The motion to deny the certificate of appropriateness passes.
Thank you very much. We have one additional item to cover. That would be the opportunity for the public to address the Historic Preservation Commission on non-agenda items. Don't see any, but just checking. Thank you all for your time. Any additional information from staff
Nothing
before we
further.
adjourn? Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
I think there's a motion to adjourn.
I'm seconding that.
I don't think we need to second it, but we have a second, okay. I think that motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and all of the effort that you put into this.